And then I can make sure that everything's right as we're starting everything up here.
Okay.
Just let me know if you get the notification. That means we're live.
I just got it.
Okay, then that means we're live.
And I will, as usual, check to make sure the sound is okay and whatnot.
It should be, because I do not have the page up, because that's the one I closed by accident. So we shouldn't have any sound issues. You can check if you'd like, but I don't have any other sound sources on my computer right now. So this is the thing that sucks about using a computer remotely. I don't know what the sound environment is over there. So that's why problems can occur unless we actually check the sound on the stream.
Yeah, the sound's okay, by the way.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I think we're good there. So, all right. So we're going to talk about this great book by Peter Boghossian and James Lindsey called How to Have Impossible and Very Practical Guide. This is a very practical guide to having impossible conversations. So originally we were going to have Reed on here, and I was going to be like, hell yeah, this guy is all about that. But I don't know what happened to Reed. But here today, of course, we got me, the woke centrist, aka Dusty Cubes and all that. And we're going to go through our introductions. And this is the first time, I believe, we have Tim Keefe here. Chief Keefe. Can you go ahead and tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. So I am a regular guest on Andrew's podcast, The Mindgasms, and currently we're doing 2 series, Postmodern Theology and Delusional, where we're investigating intellectual influences on Gilles Deleuze. So my background in particular is I have been studying philosophy for the better part of 25 years. I am a trained academic. I do have a master's in the subject, and wisely, pretty much in the same vein as the Partially Examined Life guys did, we had a background in philosophy, but we thought better of it, and I did something else with my life. But I've kept up with the reading, and as you and I were talking before we started, Dusty, is that Andrew certainly knows this about me over the course of the year, is that I'm quite well read. I'm not an expert in any one thing, but I'm quite well read, meaning that I know the literature, and I definitely can go find things out. Fact-checking, in other words, but also, something a book that I had read 20 years ago that really has an insight, I can go track that down. So, I say that not necessarily to toot my own horn, but it's also something that I really can't keep under wraps. And getting into intellectual discussion with folks sometimes has been a challenge because, number one, either they have a simplistic approach to things, or number two is they're just not really that well informed. And as an example with the Delusional series is that really we're going through this kind of off the cuff. I'm not an expert in Deleuze, and I'm learning something about him all the time with each essay that we go through. But it's helpful to do something like that, and it really forces me to go back to understanding the literature. Revisiting Husserl, revisiting Whitehead, what we did with the last subject. And philosophy is also, when you get into it, a lot of understanding the literature and going back in the history and understanding. I mean, you're kind of doing intellectual history at the same time, where that takes a while, then it takes an interest. So that's where I am, and I still have an interest in the subject. I probably will until the day they put me in the ground. And I think it's been really good because, as the saying goes, iron sharpens iron. So it's really helped me in having more intelligent conversations and spotting bullshit and avoiding mudslinging exercises.
Mm-hmm. And every episode we do, you help educate me more and be better at that too. And I love learning, and I love learning about philosophy. And improving my intellectual abilities as well.
Yeah. You're also humble, Andrew, which is important.
Humble until he reaches the Facebook comment section.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, nobody's
That's
perfect.
that's why I need to learn more from this book. How to have impossible conversations.
Yep.
No, I was there with you, Andrew. I remember us, like, pretty early on, I was a pretty big asshole in the mixed martial arts group.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do a lot less of that because I just don't really need to be an asshole to people.
Yeah. I need to, like, one thing that, well, unless, as we talked about before we start this, if I'm talking to someone who never argues in bad faith about anything, I'm just as much of an asshole as anyone else, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do try to do most of the time is, like, ask people questions about their beliefs, but then also insert my own beliefs. But I want to try to get better at, like, just asking people questions and learning about how they form their beliefs and stuff, which is obviously one of the main points of the book.
Yep.
All right. Well, do you need to introduce yourself, Andrew? I'm pretty sure our audience knows who you are.
Yeah, I'm on Mindgasms. Tim is on there all the time, and you have been many times as well. And we talk about lots of ideas. And yeah, I give all my information at the end of these too. But yeah, Mindgasms.
All right. So one thing I'll say is, because I'm going to take a little bit of a back seat in this conversation. When I say back seat, that doesn't mean I'm not going to say anything. What it means is that, one, I am not the expert here. So that is one of the reasons why I'm taking a little bit of a back seat. Two, this actual topic was prompted to me. Andrew told me that you, Tim, wanted to do a discussion about this. So since you really wanted to do this discussion, I will let you lead the horse here, because you probably, I think you've been through the entire book so far. So, and then you have the philosophical background to really talk about some of these concepts in the book. So I'm going to let you really take us to where you want us to go here in this conversation.
Okay, well, thank you, Dusty. I could do that. Okay, so yes, I did want to discuss this book for a couple reasons. Number one is it's an important subject. And I have been following Reed recently with his Courteous conversation, I think he calls it.
Cordial Curiosity.
Cordial conversation, okay. And then Peter Boghossian's kind of gotten on the bandwagon too. He has, I subscribe to his channel, but now he's starting to do these kind of cordial conversations. A passerby, hey, can you sit down? We want to talk about this. Street epistemology, right? Which I think is a really good way to approach this thing, because it's, even Boghossian has said in his talks is that what is this basically? This is Socratic questioning. The Greek term is the elenchus. What does Socrates do in Plato's dialogues? If a particular interlocutor, be it Cratylus or Thrasymachus or whoever it is in whatever dialogue we're looking at, makes some statements, and then what does Socrates do? The irony of the Socratic ignorance, where Socrates says that he knows nothing, but then in the purpose of the elenchus, the Socratic questioning, really peppering his interlocutor with questions. So tell me what you think justice is. Mm-hmm. Definition. Well, tell me what you think this and this is in your definition. And going through there, where at the end, then the interlocutor is confused because he has demonstrated in his answers to the subsequent questions that he really doesn't understand what he had said in the beginning, whether it's justice, truth, beauty, take your pick. Okay. And that's been around for centuries, Socratic questioning. It's come more to the fore, I've noticed, is because, especially fueled by social media, is that people really can't have conversations anymore. Where, sure, somebody might be a Republican, somebody might be a Democrat, somebody might be a Libertarian, their particular political leaning, but they can't seem to find common ground on anything.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing for religious folks, okay? Andrew, I was before we started recording, I was telling Dusty about what we were doing with Shane in postmodern theology. Is that you're still the atheist and Shane is the believer, but I also have respect for Shane because he's orthodox, and the orthodox isn't so preoccupied with argumentation. It acknowledges the element of the mystical. There's also some humility in there. I'm not going to, as far as religious belief, I'm not going to knock anybody that's religious. I describe myself as agnostic, even though I was raised Catholic. It's more of let's try to have intelligent conversations about the subject itself, somewhat academically. What we try to do in the Mindgasms. But when it comes to other things, it's not combat. It's not blood sports. Yeah. It's really. I guess what I'm getting at is cordiality and civility. That seems to have been lost in the past several years.
Mm-hmm. And also with Shane, Shane's a good example of someone who we both know really well, so it's easier to take what they say charitably. If you don't know someone, sometimes it's easier to just be rude to them, whereas always when I talk with Shane now, I just try to interpret what he's saying in the best possible way, and if I disagree with him, I don't jump down his throat or something like that. And then in terms of religion, which you mentioned too, I'm much more like you now than I used to be, whereas a lot of people probably know that I used to be a militant atheist, and even though I was raised as Christian by parents who were ministers, but now I'm much more like you, just sort of interested in theology from a philosophical perspective, trying to investigate what people believe and why they believe it. And on our last episode, I was really fascinated by Alfred North Whitehead's definition of an immanent God, and especially relating it to Deleuze's plane of immanence. So all of that stuff, anything that you disagree with can be really interesting. That's why I'll watch conservative political commentators or something, even though I'm not conservative, or watch people who are much farther left than me, even though I'm not super progressive or anything like that.
Yes, please don't be super progressive. We need less of those people.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead to the book itself. Now, Jonathan Haidt informs a lot of what's going on here in the book, and Reed has mentioned him in his talks. The Righteous Mind, classic text, I think, is what it's going to be in Psychology of Belief, and the Happiness Hypothesis, things like that.
Jonathan Haidt is one part of the Holy Trinity of mixed mental arts.
Yes. So
Jonathan Haidt, Daniel Kahneman, and David Sloan Wilson. That's the Holy Trinity there.
So who is who? Who's the Father, Son, and who's the Holy Ghost?
Oh, I don't know if that determination was ever made.
Okay. Well, you have to get your theology straight at some point.
All three parts of the Trinity are the same whole unified God.
That's right. They're all part of the same entity that is mixed mental arts.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we have Jonathan Haidt. Definitely recommend you read his books, listen to his talks, very good stuff. Also, what informs this here is something called moral intuitionism, which Haidt has mentioned in his works too. Okay, so broadly speaking, moral intuitionism is something in the philosophy of moral theory and ethics that what's an intuition? It's something that is internal to the person that you don't need an argument to flesh out necessarily. Whenever somebody says, I know right from right and I know wrong from wrong, okay, so more or less they're expressing an intuition, okay? Mm-hmm. And some things you could even say, now, it's not to say that everybody accepts moral intuition of hook, line, and sinker. Again, I'm not an expert in this because I really hasn't read too much ethical theory. I know of it, moral intuitions, that one could reasonably say across the board that it is wrong to sexually abuse a child. Okay? Lots of people would agree that's the case. Not everybody, but lots of people would do that. Now, you could say, well, you don't even need to argue about that. It's just wrong to sexually abuse a child. Okay. Now you're expressing an intuition. It could be a positive intuition, it could be a negative intuition. With some ethical precepts, such as it's wrong to kill, okay, that's not necessarily a ethical intuition, moral intuition, because there are certain cases where it is all right to kill. So one would argue. Now you're starting to get into argumentation. So it seems less of an intuition and more of a precept that could hold up to an argumentation for or against. Okay. So this is what we're talking about with moral intuitions. Now, if you go to page 171 in the book, the Boghossian book, how he describes it here, this is Boghossian and Lindsey, the co-authors, they say, quote, think of moral intuitions as tendencies to lean towards certain core values, sanctity of life, freedom, safety, purity, rather than others. Our moral intuitions are formed before we try to figure out what's the right thing to do, what's not, and how we know our intuitions are justified. That is, moral epistemology. Okay? So that's a broad definition of a moral intuition. Now, moral epistemology is also another central topic that's in this book, because epistemology, broadly defined, is a theory of knowledge. How does one come to know what one knows? What is knowledge? How do you define it? How does one acquire it? What's its relationship with truth? What's its relationship with facts and things like that? But a moral epistemology is my beliefs that of certain things. Now, again, like the moral intuition. So, sanctity of life. Life is important. Freedom is important. Safety is important. Purity is important, and you can run through the entire list. Okay, and then the moral epistemology is the way that I've come about to those beliefs and the way that I justify those beliefs. Okay,
and in the Righteous Mind, that's one of the ways that Jonathan Haidt talks about how people with different political identities, like liberals, conservatives, libertarians, and so on, they have different moral foundations and different moral intuitions that lead them to have these biases toward certain positions before they hear about them, as you described, or religious people versus non-religious people, or people in different religions too.
That's right. So they have already formed their beliefs before they have gone through discourse.
Yeah.
Argumentation. And if you try to argue to the contrary, saying that they're wrong, they're just going to dig their heels in, because again, they formed their beliefs prior to any kind of discourse or any kind of argumentation. Now, when you're getting into the moral epistemology, you can start asking the questions, how did one come to acquire those beliefs from however long ago it was? Most likely, in the case of religious people, they were born into a particular religious community. Somebody was born Catholic, somebody was born Pentecostal, somebody was born Adventist, or whatever it is. And as a child, you're just absorbing, you're acquiring what the beliefs are around you. You're not really thinking through these beliefs until you reach a certain age. Some people do it much easier than others. If you read the lives of some atheists or agnostics, they might have lost their faith when they were a teenager, or possibly earlier, 8, 9, 10 years old, just because it didn't make any sense to them what the adults in the religious community were preaching to them. Okay, then they started to question their beliefs, and some people, it might be towards the end of their lives when they become a non-believer, because they had invested so much of themselves in their beliefs. And again, this is not just religious beliefs. They invested so much of themselves in their beliefs going through their lives, is that when they finally do change their mind, it's quite a painful experience. Which seems to be the case, is what a lot of people do when they're presented with contrary evidence. You are trying to address the rational mind, but the rational mind is not primary. the emotional
Yeah.
mind. The emotions are more here because, again, these beliefs were formed emotionally and prior to any kind of argumentation or rational discourse.
Well, that's why the great metaphor that Jonathan Haidt uses is the blind rider on the elephant,
Yep.
and the prefrontal cortex, or your rational reasoning mind, is the tiny newest part of the brain. That's the blind. That's the blind rider controlling the giant elephant, which is your emotions or intuitions, which are like just galloping all over the place all of the time.
Right. Yeah. Dusty, you got any comments?
No, I love Jonathan Haidt. I've read all of his books, and everything here is spot on regarding the moral intuition theory. And there are so many, like reading. It's very easy to see for people who have read into this that when you have an argument online or even with somebody in person, if you are aware of these things, just that. It's not that this person is evil or bad. It's just that, hey, there are different environments and even different arguments that have not even been explored yet.
Right.
And that someone's position doesn't necessarily have to be formed by an argument. Haidt gives so many different examples. Most of them are pretty obscene and absurd, but
there's a really good one I was just thinking of, actually.
I think the easiest one to say is, okay, well, one of Haidt's examples is you have a brother and sister, they go off on like a vacation or something, and they agree that, hey, we're going to use all the protection in the world, no child is going to be born of this, is what we're going to do morally wrong? Like, we have an intuition. Most people, I don't think of many people who wouldn't have this intuition that what they're doing is wrong. But of course, that's one of the many examples that he uses that highlight this moral intuition that we all have, unless you're like a psychopath or something. But
Right.
That's kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And I tell me what you guys think about this. I think that we still sort of accept that now because we gradually figured out before science did that if you have too much inbreeding, then it leads to like a lot of genetic deformities and stuff like that. Whereas like through a large period, or maybe even most of history, the like brothers marrying sisters and cousins marrying each other and stuff like that was done as a way to preserve the bloodline. But then it seemed like gradually people figured it out, and we sort of know this with science now, as far as I know, that if you do that, it really dramatically increases the chances of the child being born with deformities or dying early or all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah, a common element was hemophilia.
Yeah.
Among the royalty because of the inbreeding.
Was that why Tsar Nicholas II had that?
I believe so. So.
Was he the one in care of Rasputin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't. Let me rephrase that. It wouldn't surprise me if that was the case, but I don't know enough about Tsar Nicholas why he was hemophilia, because hemophilia is a genetic disease, and sometimes it just runs in families. Doesn't mean that there was incest going on. Although maybe there had been incest in the past, and that just got passed out.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, but you're right about this moral intuition. And I was going to say, don't forget the incest taboo from primitive societies from a long time ago. It would be interesting to investigate more, but we're not going to do this here. Where these intuitions came from. I think some of them were related to taboos from a long time ago. Just certain things that you don't talk about, or certain things that you don't do because it is wrong. However, again, it was a belief that was formed not necessarily through rational discourse, just something that was picked up. It's just wrong, And people still talk about this. Well, it's just wrong. Period. End of story.
Yeah.
And you can't even get reasons from them because they just shut down the conversation.
And we see that all the time, like, particularly I see this all the time in political conversations, especially online. Like, I've talked with you, Dusty, before in particular many times about one or two of my family members who have very much more extreme political beliefs than I do, and they make all sorts of these arguments that are like, like one of them, for example, was that Gillette ad. They were saying something like, anyone who has a problem with that Gillette ad is obviously rationally a misogynistic asshole.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the Gillette ad.
Yeah, the Gillette ad. Let's not talk about that. That's just it's a sad piece of marketing.
Yeah.
I don't. The thing about the Gillette ad, I'm just going to jump in here real quick. I don't think Gillette really cares about that message. I think they just thought it was a message that was going to make them some money.
That's what I think too. Yeah.
They were trying to get attention through notoriety.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and nip that one in the bud because that was just a sad incident. Let's go back to the book. Okay. So for those that have not read the book, there are 8 chapters. And Boghossian and Lindsey, they start off with the first chapter, When Conversations Seem Impossible, and then they go through the 7 fundamentals of good conversation, which I hope we get to cover all here. And then beginner, intermediate, advanced skills for people who, you know, this is the level of how firmly they hold their belief. They go all the way to ideologues, potential ideologues, which are really exhausting to try to convince otherwise. Okay. Yeah, master's level, two keys to conversing with ideologues. That's chapter 7. Okay. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead to the first chapter, When Conversations Seem Impossible. So I have a couple of highlighted sections here. So they say, what's an impossible conversation? Conversations that feel futile because they take place across a seemingly unbridgeable gulf of disagreement in ideas, beliefs, morals, politics, or worldviews. Okay, pretty self-explanatory. Then they continue, usually the more invested someone is in their beliefs, the more they want to speak about them. Do we agree?
Yes.
Dusty, what do you think?
Sorry about that. I got a message from Reed. In the event thing, just to cut in here, when I set the event up, did I put it in Eastern time or was it in Pacific time?
Eastern time.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay.
All right. No, I was just trying to talk to Reed. I believe he thought this was 7 p.m. Pacific that it was supposed to start.
Okay.
Oh.
So maybe he'll be joining us shortly. Yeah, I was saying is usually the more invested someone is in their beliefs, the more they want to speak about them. Have you noticed that's the case?
I'm sorry, I'm so distracted by Reed here. Go ahead and ask that question again.
Okay. Number 3. Dusty. Usually the more invested someone is in their beliefs, the more they want to speak about them. Is that the case? Have you noticed that?
You know what? I believe that would be typically true. At least they will want to steer a conversation to those beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're talking about politics or anything of that nature, most people want to profess themselves. Like, you know, there's a thing when you're talking to vegans, all they want to do is talk about veganism.
Oh yeah.
Libertarians basically want to shit on the government all day.
Yes.
You know, it's basically, I would say that's basically true.
Yeah. Yeah, so then they continue in the next sentence. The difficulty in these cases is in having somebody speak to you. It's that a give and take seems hopeless because the person across from you fails to speak with you and instead speaks at you.
Yeah, we all do that to each other all over the place online, Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah, I think people are more prone to be less cordial online. That's just me as well. But I think that's the case. Talking at you, I think, is basically a result of frustration and you feeling that you're not getting your point across.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last sentence, in such cases, you're viewed as a receptacle to pour ideas into or as an opponent to be debated and vanquished.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. On the subject of the limitations of trying to conduct something online, Andrew, Dusty, and I were talking about this before you came and before we started recording. You know what hermeneutics is, right? I think we've touched on that term before.
That's I forget exactly, actually.
Man, you read philosophy, and I was like, man, I expect Andrew to know this. He studies this stuff, kind of.
I thought it was something similar to epistemology, but I think I have that wrong.
Actually, you're right. It's like a type of epistemology or something like that.
Well, it's within the same ballpark. Hermeneutics is the theory of interpretation.
Okay.
So I was telling Dusty, this is a very good article. Maybe we can put this in the low bar. This was by, it's a fairly short article on Medium about, he's a communication theorist, okay? And one of his works was about email, okay? Which you could take this and you could extend it to like Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is. I'd say Twitter is the chief offender because of how small it is, 100 and some characters or whatever. So he talks about with electronic communications that something is always lost. Just like any text. Now, the thing about hermeneutics is, and this is long before electronic communication, if you're reading the Bible, for example, you're reading a text that was written centuries ago, that was compiled by scholars centuries ago, that was translated into English, which you happen to read. The first translation, the Geneva Bible, the King James Version Bible, centuries ago, and still has been translated and retranslated and exists in a certain form, okay? So you're looking at a text that has gone through many different iterations, and there first is what this communication theorist calls distantiation. It's the separation in both time and distance that occurs between a text and its author and the text originally intended audience. Okay. So, again, the fact that it was written centuries ago, that's a long time between when the first Bible or the first books of the Bible came out to when you're reading it now. Now, because of that distantiation, are you reading the, quote, pure and unadulterated text? Of course you're not. Then a second point he brings up is what's called autonomization, which refers to the text taking on a life of its own, or when a reader's interpretation of the text endows it with living qualities and emotions. People read the Bible, they read it as an individual, they insert and imbue the text with their own, or they take it as a living document, number one.
Reed is here.
Oh, he is.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes,
right.
Reed. But you have to speak like Reed.
That's
Hello,
right.
what's up?
Hello,
Yeah.
Reed.
What
are we talking about?
arm flailing tooth
Sorry,
man.
I'm late.
We're talking about Reed and his mellifluous voice. He's very middle of the road and calm and non-threatening.
That's me.
The perfect voice for.
That's right.
straight
How's it going, Reed?
epistemology.
Yes.
I'm good.
Okay. We were talking about you earlier. I'm starting to get into your Cordial Conversation series.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
He was at Politicon recently. He did a whole bunch of really interesting interviews. And who was that? Who was that other guy with you? You told me his name before, but I forget.
He's Tyrone Wells. He has a YouTube channel called Let's Chat. Also,
Yeah.
a Street Epistemology channel.
Yeah, he's great too.
Tyrone Wells. Okay, I think I could look him up.
Have you guys just been discussing me, or have you also been talking about the book?
No, we started to get into the book.
No, we've just been talking about you the whole time, man.
Yeah, I was starting to go over an article read of you. Do you know what hermeneutics is?
Yeah.
Okay, so the theory of interpretation, and there's one article I found a few days ago on Medium by a communication theorist where he's applying hermeneutics to email and any kind of electronic communication, and then I was discussing this, dovetailing in the problems that one is encountering trying to conduct conversations online, particularly with Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is, because a lot of it is very text-based. You're not talking with the person in real time, whether face-to-face or like we're doing now with the Google Hangouts. And so things are getting lost when you're writing a little piece of text, and whoever is reading that is interpreting it in a certain way. There's a distance involved, and the person might be reading a lot more into that little piece of text than you originally intended as the author.
And we were also going over Jonathan Haidt's moral intuitions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How does this relate to the book?
So I was getting into the book and looking at the theoretical foundations of what Boghossian and Lindsey are trying to do. Now, they reference Haidt, they reference moral intuitionism, which, you've talked about that before, so maybe you could summarize what your exposure has been to moral intuitionism and really getting down to brass tacks when you talk with people and finding out what their beliefs are, how did they came to those beliefs.
Okay, cool.
So, do you have anything to say about moral intuitionism?
Moral intuitionism, I'm a big fan of Haidt. I like his model, the social intuitionist theory, and his moral foundations theory. I like to keep that in mind when talking with people, how intuitions come first, strategic reasoning second. But I think, it's just good to have that in mind. But then also figuring out how we can test our beliefs as well, how we would change our mind about whatever we think is true.
Okay.
Well said.
Okay. Yeah, so that's all I have to say about hermeneutics with that article. And Reed, we're just getting into the book.
We're talking about the foundations of big conversations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're about to, actually.
Yeah.
The foundations.
Okay. Yeah. So then, nothing more to say for chapter 1. We can go to chapter 2, which is the 7 fundamentals of good conversations. And I'll go ahead and read through the list quickly. The first one, again, this is Boghossian and Lindsey. They say, goals. Why are you interested in this conversation? That's number 1. Number 2, be partners, not adversaries. Number 3, rapport. Develop and maintain a good connection. 4, listen. Listen more, talk less. Number 5, shoot the messenger. Don't deliver your truth. Number 6, intentions. People have better intentions than you think. Number 7, walk away. Don't push your conversation partner beyond their comfort zone.
I have a problem with number 7.
Okay, what's that, Dusty?
So I'd actually do the opposite of that to people quite a bit. Push people when they no longer want to participate.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something I need to work on there.
I used to have that problem a lot, particular when I was a militant atheist. If I were arguing with a religious person and they would say, I don't want to talk about this anymore, I'd say, you can't accept that it's irrational to be religious. What is wrong with you?
Yeah, those kind of conversations are never going to end well, no matter what.
Yeah.
No. No, Reed, I'm curious. In your discussions with people, has anybody ever pushed back at you for the way the conversation has unfolded?
Yeah, a few times for sure. I think one of my most recent ones is like a hardcore fundamentalist creationist, and he basically just questioned me the entire time. I just kind of let him drive the conversation.
Okay. So what was the outcome? I don't think I've seen that discussion.
Well, I just he asked me various questions about evolution. I tried to give my layman, thoughts, and then he just we just had a discussion about it. It was cordial, and at the end he came back and said he really appreciated the conversation and that he felt that it was really good. He doesn't see that a lot often, people being able to do that type of thing.
Yeah, that's good.
So, throughout your conversations that you have, there has not been anybody that has basically pushed you away from the conversation where it resulted in you walking away?
No, that hasn't happened, no.
Okay.
Good for you.
Yeah. I'm not going to say it happens to me sometimes, but this is not with random people on the streets. It's usually with people I know. That's a little bit different.
That's like a little bit of the opposite of what I said earlier, because I was talking about how, like, in terms of social media conversations, it can be easier to have a shorter fuse with someone online, and it can be easier to have an argument in good faith with someone if you know them really well. Like we were talking about our conversations with Shane, Tim, and but sometimes it can be the opposite too. Like one of my family members who has much more extreme political views than me, I've had like really terrible arguments with them because it's almost like if they're a family member and you love them, you think like, how can you possibly think this way? It's so, why? You're my family member. How can you think that way?
Just love those discussions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's go ahead and flesh out some of the 7 fundamentals here in Chapter 2. So with goals, they say, what's your purpose? And you have to identify at the outset, why are you having the discussion? What are your goals? What do you want to get out of this? Of any kind of discussion. And Reed, the discussions that you have, what would you say are your prime goals? Are you trying to really find out why people hold the beliefs they do and what their moral epistemology is in the classic approach to street epistemology, or do you have other goals in mind?
Yeah, I have multiple goals. I think the main one is seeking truth and also helping people reflect on how they came to believe whatever, even if it's something that I believe is true and have good reasons for. I'd like to still do it the same way as I do any other conversation. But if it is something that is very strange or obviously false, then I think my main goal is like helping people reflect on how they came to know what they know.
Okay.
Right. And I noticed that you use one of the techniques that they use in the book in a lot of your street epistemology conversations too. You ask people, sometimes you ask people before you start the conversation to estimate the number value on a scale from 1 to 10, how strong their belief is in a particular belief that they hold, and then ask them to reassess when they're done the conversation too. That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the techniques later on in the book. I think it's one of the later chapters.
Yeah.
That's popular.
Yeah, so number 1 is make sure you get your goals straight. Why are you trying to have this conversation?
Yeah.
So the number 2, partnerships rather. This is on page 12. So Boghossian and Lindsey, I'll read part here. They say, quote, "The way to change minds, influence people, build relationships, and maintain friendships is through kindness, compassion, empathy, treating individuals with dignity and respect, and exercising these considerations in psychologically safe environments."
For sure.
Safe space.
Would anybody say that? Would anybody say
Yeah.
that Facebook is a safe space?
No.
It depends.
It can be if it's on like a private group with just
Yeah,
then
if
less
you're,
people.
yeah, it really depends on who you're interacting with. Like, if you
Yeah.
get a Joe Rogan group, you're just gonna get ad hominemed to death.
Yeah.
That's just what's gonna happen. If you go to Mixed Martial Arts, it will happen rarely, but if someone does do it, they get called out on it.
Yeah.
And there's kind of like this communal adherence to a lot of the rules where, hey, that's not cool. But in other spaces, it's whatever goes, so it really depends on how focused the group is and how much they adhere to actual conversation that is conducive to civility. There are just some places that aren't civil. I just happen to think there are places that are civil if they're, adhering to some type of rule set, and everybody agrees on that rule set. And the people who don't agree typically leave. So, it just kind of weeds out those type of people anyway.
Okay.
The unstructured group is another good example of that too.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like when you add a structure to a group, was also the case before Facebook ever came on the scene, is that when it's a particular group, say if it's a Dungeons and Dragons group, for example, everybody knows why they're there. At least they think they would. And there's certain rules because you're playing a game, and the rule and the rules apply to the game. Everybody should know what the rules are. If anybody violates the rules, then that potentially derails the dynamic of the group. And if they continue to offend, then they get kicked out. So on Facebook, if it's a private group, as Reed was saying, and there's more structures and everybody understands why they're there and what the rules are to engage, that really reduces the chances that it's going to be a shit show like you would in an unstructured group.
For sure.
Okay. Now, would you also say that in a structured group, again, we're talking about Facebook here, that the members of that group treat everybody with kindness, compassion, and empathy? Probably not 100% of the time, but maybe there's a lot more civility there than there would be in an unstructured group.
Yeah, maybe like 70% of the time instead of 30% of the time or something like that.
Well, there's always going to be that aspect. You can't. No, we're not expecting everybody to be a robot.
No.
And people are going to flare up every once in a while. But if there is a structure in place, at least they know that the community does not accept those particular types of behaviors. And then there are groups where they don't care, what's said.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, and then they continue, the safe communicative environment is to view yourself as a conversation partner. Okay. So Reed, with your conversations that you have with the passersby in the street, have you ever encountered, I'm sure there's been at least one person who's maybe defensive when they come into that space because they think that you're going to you're gonna undercut what their beliefs are. Maybe they're hesitant. They don't quite know what to expect. I don't know, what percent of the time would you say the people that you talk with fit in that category?
Yeah, for sure. What I do is a very strange hobby. You don't really see people in public with like a table and microphones and cameras out in public often, but people are interested. I kind of self-select, I guess, people that are interested and they're open. If people aren't open, they don't really talk to me because I don't really talk to anyone else. I just sit there. I let people come up to me. But when they do come up, they're interested. Some people are a little wary. But that's the purpose of Rapport. I always try to make sure I tell them, my motivations, why I'm doing it, and help build rapport for a few minutes for sure.
Okay.
So you don't use the Steven Crowder model.
No.
Build the wall, change my mind.
Yes. That sounds more like the other person, not Reed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's right. Besides, Reed, you don't look threatening at all, so I'm sure that helps.
All right.
Okay, let's see. All right, continuing on. Make understanding your conversation partner's reasoning. Okay, understanding. So then they continue. One key to realizing you can have seemingly impossible conversations is recognizing that discussions are natural learning environments for both people. Treating an individual as a partner in civil dialogue does not mean accepting their conclusions or buying into their reasoning.
Mm-hmm. That's important to remember. I need to remember that myself too for trying to have better conversations with people, particularly in arguments on social media.
Mm-hmm. Right. Dusty, you were saying something about that before, a certain member of Mixed Mental Arts who's like that?
Well, I'm not going to say it by name because
But we all know who it
I'm not going to put them on blast.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't do that either.
But yeah, there have been things where people have posted where basically they're trying to start specifically, and this is a public place to post stuff, and they're specifically posting to start an argument with me.
They're baiting you?
Yeah, basically.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a person that's currently blocked me. It's not who you think it is.
Oh, okay.
But they've...
It's not the person who's blocked me too.
I don't know if they've blocked you, but they quote-unquote have called me out a couple times.
Okay.
I don't know why, but this happens when it's really hard to talk to people when they're extremely, I don't know.
They don't act in good faith?
Yeah, basically. Like, they're basically, their goal, if we're talking about rule number 1, their goal really isn't nested into any of those goals. What they're doing is they're trying to fight a battle and win against me. So, off the bat, it's not going to be a good conversation.
But I'm just curious, Dusty, why are they baiting you in particular?
Why do they bait me in particular? I don't know. It's just it usually happens to people who are very adamant that I am a specific political label.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
And I deny that, and I think it's their job to prove that I am this specific label, even though, like, I agree with a lot of their policies. Like, if I'm talking to like a progressive, most of the people who do this are like super far left.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm kind of pro, universal health care. I'm like pro regulation. I don't know why you think I'm like this hardcore right-wing libertarian.
Yeah. Well, I think like, if I were to guess, I would think that some of that would be that you try to defend a broad spectrum of political views, and you don't have like a uniform thought in only one political ideology. So some people, especially if they're really extreme progressives or extreme any type of political ideology, might think, oh, you're defending the other side? That must mean you agree with them.
Well, yeah. I do agree with them sometimes.
Yeah, there's that too. Like,
but not wholesale.
Defending someone doesn't mean that you agree with everything they always say, though, right?
Well, the problem between that, like, if we're talking about what the fundamental problem is, the problem is that I am trying to truth seek, mostly in these types of conversations. And if something is true, like if I have to defend if something actually happened or was true, regardless if it was a right winger or a left winger. Like,
Right.
just because I'm pointing out some truth doesn't mean I'm siding with that particular side. This is just something that is true. I'm not going to deny it as something that's false because it's convenient for a specific ideology.
Right.
It's just what I try to do is truth seek. I just think the people who are very far on those fringes aren't really interested in that.
Yeah, for sure.
They, yeah, because I don't get involved in any kind of Facebook stuff. I only use Facebook really to communicate with people like Andrew, so we set things up. And same thing here is there are some very real limitations of the platform because everything is text-based and you're not actually talking in real time like we are doing here, with conversations here. And some people just, quite obviously, they can defend themselves, or they can try to truth seek or meet the other person halfway, have a better conversation, speech rather than text. No, they just can't write properly, or they're just not practiced at it. And I've noticed this enough on Facebook where people are just always into the one or two sentences, or maybe just comments or things like that, and that could be interpreted a whole different ways. Now, Twitter is the worst offender, I think, in this case.
Yeah.
Even though Twitter has its usefulness in certain respects, but it's just, there's so many limitations with electronic communication that stuff gets lost, people misunderstand, and if you have these people that want to try to bait you, all they're looking for is one opportunity to stick their hook in you and try to drag you around.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why, like, in terms of, like, just text-based conversations, like, sort of as we were talking about earlier in the mixed mental arts and unstructured groups, one thing that I like about those is that even if someone disagrees with you, they make really detailed and thoughtful explanations for their argument, and it's not just these like 2-sentence dismissals or something like that, for the most part anyway, I would say.
Yeah. Reed, I'm curious, how would you conduct street epistemology on Facebook if that was your only medium?
There is a Facebook group called Chat with a Street Epistemologist, and
Okay.
it's not that active, because it doesn't seem to work very well.
Okay.
Because it's like even though it is a private group, it's like anyone can get on a thread. Usually people put like a topic in the Facebook group and then ask people to question them, and then it's just not very organized on Facebook. But private messenger on Facebook is fine, but that's a little different.
Why do you think it doesn't work?
Because it's more about signaling how smart you are, or how good of a person you are for believing in whatever you're getting questioned on.
Okay.
That's probably the main motivation for
Do you also think that it seems like more and more people today really can't articulate their thoughts in writing as they can in speech?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think a lot of people do a lot of writing besides the occasional tweets or Facebook posts. So it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I think there is definitely some obstacles. Like for me personally, the quality of my posts will degrade depending on what device I am doing or communicating from.
Mm-hmm.
If I am communicating from a cell phone, the communication isn't going to be as good as if I'm sitting at a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just better able to communicate using a keyboard to edit sentences. I also have, going into it with a keyboard, you already know, okay, if I make a mistake, it's very easy to correct.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going on a cell phone and you got big old fingers like me, once you make a mistake, it's going to be a pain in the butt compared to using a keyboard to fix that mistake. So even that can influence the type of answers you give. So usually on a phone, I'll usually give shorter, more curt answers than when I'm on a keyboard, where I can kind of fully pad the conversation without feeling like I'm just being super direct. Some people, can't handle that super directness, but it's not because I want to be super direct. It's because using a phone, it's inconvenient to be more than just super direct.
Yeah, I got two things to say to that. So I've made the comment elsewhere before, is that I got online in the mid-90s when email was still relatively new for people that were not part of university networks, because that's when you first saw it. And those of us who were practicing writing letters, long form, transferred that over to email. So if you're composing an email, you write concise, tight paragraphs. You try your best to express yourself. You could write it, look at it, change it. Before you click send, you make sure that it was good. And then you send it. And then hopefully your recipient would do the same thing and sending the message back to you. So it was just that back and forth, and it certainly was not the volume like it is now. So I bring that up is because I definitely have noticed over the past 20-odd some years is that communication is degraded, because people don't write letters anymore, really. They write emails quickly, or they use certain kinds of forms of address in emails that are a lot more informal, or they talk around points. These are just all things that I've noticed. And then when Facebook and Twitter came on the scene, it really started to degrade because it's just snippets. And now, as you're mentioning, Dusty, is that more and more people are doing it from a mobile device, their phone, than they are doing from a keyboard. So, the upshot to this is communication has just degraded over the years. And I'm curious, Reed, have you noticed any kind of degradation in communication when you're talking with people in the one-to-one like you do on the street epistemology, where you're sitting there and you're trying to be charitable and listening to them, but you're thinking, man, I'm really having a tough time understanding your train of thought because you're just all over the place?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I'd have to test. A lot of people are different. I'd have to tell. It would be the best way to tell is if I knew someone and they were one way, but then they got into social media and then they were a different way. So it's really hard to tell. I don't think so. I think people are pretty good in face to face.
Okay. What about you, Andrew? What's been your experience?
Well, I was just thinking as you were talking about that, about me personally, that probably a lot of people notice that when even if I'm texting someone, I tend to give long, detailed, and thoughtful or thorough answers. I think if I had to guess, I think that some of that for me would be that I enjoy writing, and I regularly write both fiction and nonfiction. So it's actually, and this is a common thing for writers that I've heard interviewed too. It's actually really difficult to make yourself sound more concise. But I think that
I agree.
Yeah?
I agree. Well, whenever you communicate with me over Facebook Messenger, you have these giant paragraphs, and then I'm like, okay, cool. And I feel so bad about it, but I know it's wow, I know this is the writer in you, so, and then I'm not quite that wordy, and I'm on a cell phone again, that also is a factor. But yeah, I totally see how your writerness, when you do communicate, especially in private messages, Jesus, there's this giant block of text here, and I feel so bad that I can't even reciprocate that. But it might just be, okay, you bang that out in a minute, and it would take me like 15 minutes to bang something out like that.
I'm
No,
not
no, no, it takes
worthy.
me-
I'm not
it takes-
worthy.
It takes me like 15 minutes too. I'll treat it like it's something I'm actually writing seriously. Even text messages sometimes I'll like edit it and maybe I'll take something out, or maybe I'll be like, oh, that made me think of this too. But in terms of like in terms of other people, I would say that I mean, like when I'm having text conversations or like Facebook Messenger or conversations with people on social media, I would say that I would agree that people in those communication forms, there does seem to be something lost, and people are more concise, and they communicate more sloppily, and they use all the new millennial lingo or whatever you would call it, like lol and all those other things that sometimes I have to look them up on Urban Dictionary. But to answer your other question that you asked, Reed, also, I would say I would agree with him in that I would say that in face-to-face conversations, it doesn't seem like people communicate the way that they do in just text conversations. I think that if you have that face-to-face interaction with someone, it seems like it's more natural and easy, because like when you're actually in front of someone and you see their body language and stuff like that, it's easy to interpret their tone and what their intention is, and it's easy to be more charitable because they're standing right in front of you. So it's harder to, especially if it's someone you don't know, just like yell in their face or something like that.
Yeah. I had an additional question for you, Reed. What percentage of the people that you've interviewed, did you get a sense that they were really engaged in the conversation rather than just kind of going through the motions because this was something that piqued their interest and they weren't quite sure and they were still on the defensive? You understand what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know if they're engaged the entire time, but I'd say the majority for sure, maybe upwards of 70%. At least a portion of the conversation, they're genuinely, pretty engaged, pretty reflective.
Okay. Why do you think that is? I know you said in the beginning is that this is a self-selecting group. Is it because they find it intriguing that there's an outlet where they can sit down and maybe talk with somebody who is reasonable and is going to actually listen to them, and they're hoping that's going to take place? And then when you do that, then they really open up because they know they're not going to get judged or they're not going to get shouted down for what they're discussing.
Yeah, I think SE is now maybe 6-7 years old now, and we've honed it really well to help people talk about things, and it's mostly listening, like maybe 50%, 60% of the time. We're not really saying anything. We're just asking questions every now and then, and we've really honed it into a well-oiled machine.
Okay, that's good. All right. So back to the book, continuing with forming partnerships. Boghossian and Lindsey, they mentioned 3 specific points. The first one is you make your goals of collaboration and understanding explicit. Okay. Number 2, you give your partner room to decline the conversational invitation. You let them say yes or no whether they want to continue. And number 3, you ask yourself, not your partner, how could someone believe that? And ask it in earnest, with curiosity instead of incredulity. So in other words, you're asking, it's interesting you think that way. Tell me more. How would somebody come about to believe that, instead of, how could somebody believe that?
Yeah.
It's an intonation there.
That's an example of another one of the limits of social media or text conversations, because you don't know the tone, right?
Right. You can't discern the tone from the language, and so somebody, particularly somebody who's just looking for an opportunity to debate you, can read that and they say, "Oh, you're becoming all sarcastic on me. I got you," and now they're going to open with both barrels, and then it just degenerates.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's part of I kind of have a little bit of an anthropological hat on when I do this. It's kind of just a study of human psychology as well. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Sure.
I like I've said a few times on this now, I want to try to approach conversations more myself that way too, particularly like on social media and stuff like that. I think I'm better than that at that than some people, but I definitely could use a lot of improvement.
Okay, so moving to number 3 about rapport. Okay.
Actually, I've been working on this keynote all day, where I've like tried to compile a bunch of the points in the book a little more visually, and I actually have there's this Magna Bosco example in the book, and I actually I found the original video where this is taken from, and I can share it if you want.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure thing.
Because if you have the link, I think I can. Well, there's a couple ways that could be done. I'm trying to think of how that would work on the Google Hangout. But I know if I had direct access to it, I can actually open up a window for it.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes. Can you see
screen
this?
Sharing it? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
cool.
there you go.
So yeah, kind of breaking it down. Here's chapter 2, rapport. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And here's the example. Ready? We can watch. It's like a 2-minute example.
Okay.
And hopefully you can hear it. Let me know if you can't hear this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not getting any audio.
Yeah, me neither.
Oh, you're not getting any audio?
Yeah, in order to get audio from your computer, you have to do a mix, internal mix.
I think I know what I need to do. Hang on, I changed my computers. I have like a loopback thing. Blue. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, because I know you could do audio for sure. You just have to select
Just have to
your computer's audio.
And Hangouts specifically. Here we go. So this should work.
Would you happen to have 5? Would you happen to have 5? You're not winded or anything?
No.
Do you have 5 minutes to do like a chat?
Sure.
Okay. Are you okay if I live stream and record it?
Okay.
Okay.
What's it about?
Did that work? Can you hear that?
Yep.
Yeah, I heard it.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
Are you just gonna play it all at once, Reed, or are you gonna comment as it's going through?
I was gonna play it all at once, but I just wanted to make sure it worked. I couldn't hear.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah,
It
we
works.
can. Go ahead, do it.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Let me do it again. Okay. Do.
Would you happen Are you okay if I live stream and record it?
Okay.
Okay.
What's it about?
Excellent question. I have conversations with strangers for 5 minutes
Okay.
to see what they believe and why.
Okay.
And it's fun.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
much.
Whatever you prefer. Whatever you're more comfortable with. What is your first name?
Carrie.
I'm Anthony.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too. How do I spell that?
Kari.
Okay. Do you hike here a lot?
Yes.
Awesome. I've come here a couple times, and but it's usually with my kids, so I can't go as fast as
Exactly.
I want to.
I usually come with my kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they slow you down.
Yeah.
Do you cruise through it pretty fast, or?
Actually, this is the first time I came by myself, so it was fun to just go do something harder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good.
Sounds like good rapport so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the example straight from the book, right?
Yeah, that's the exact one.
Cool.
And that is building rapport.
Yeah. So Reed, in looking at that, do you think that? Because it didn't seem like Anthony really did that much. Maybe he got lucky, and that Carrie was more open, and so it was easier to establish rapport with her. Did you get that sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Reed, would you say that, I know you do the self-selection, but are there definitely people where you kind of have to work in more rapport than you usually do in any instance?
I'm not sure.
Well, there's some people that might be standoffish, but then again, you wouldn't have that problem because there's kind of like a self-selection thing going on with you.
Reed, have you also noticed there's a difference in gender? Maybe women are more open, and it's easier to build rapport with them than it is men?
Yeah, I think a little bit. Because it also depends on just general open to experience personality trait. It's hard
Your
to-
sound's a little faint, though.
My sound is a little faint.
Yeah, it's a little hard to hear.
It's the ASMR.
With volume.
How about now? Is that better?
About the same. You were doing fine before the clip. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
I'll try to mess with something.
Okay. Well, while you're doing that, I'll just go ahead and press on. So, Boghossian and Lindsey, they continue. Rapport is a kind of friendliness. This helps to do that. And they say to build rapport, you ask sincere questions. That is, questions for which you'd like to find answers, as opposed to asking questions as a tactic.
Yeah. Actually, someone in the live chat just commented on that. Mackeldoon said I am always wary of anyone who opens up with the phrase, "Wouldn't you agree that?"
Aha. Okay. So let's go ahead and run with that. So in your guys' experience, what questions would somebody ask you to cause you to freeze up and become wary? You think that it's a tactic that they're going to entrap you or something?
Yeah. I mean,
Can you think of any examples where that happens?
Yeah, typically for me, it's when they're asking you to agree with a moral question,
yeah.
and it seems like they're expecting a specific answer.
Okay.
Yeah, like, oh, isn't Trump so awful?
That's a leading question.
Yeah.
Or you agree with climate change, right?
Yeah. You're not a climate change denier, are you?
Right. Okay. Reed, how about you?
What was the question? Sorry.
So, in your experience, are there any questions that somebody would ask you where you subconsciously think that it's a tactic and they're trying to ensnare you in something, and so then you become quiet or try to evade or change the topic or something?
Yeah.
We're just looking for examples.
Yeah, it's hard to think of an example, but there's just, there's the classic leading question. It's, the classic examples like, have you stopped beating your wife type of thing. But in just building rapport, I can't think of examples, but you can tell by like the tone people usually have. Like it's like an adversarial tone.
Yes,
Well, that means we could get confusing though, right? Because what if someone has like a very pleasant tone, but they're using those types of ensnaring questions?
Yes.
Like being passive aggressive?
Possibly passive aggressive, although it's more like it's kind of like small talk questions. Okay, so they throw, whoa, what do you think of the weather today? Right? It's just trying to prime the pump for conversation. So it seems, at least on the surface, it seems innocuous, but some people might take it the wrong way. They might think it's a leading question, where it's not. That, I think, also is amplified in social media.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
What are some examples for you, Tim?
Examples for me.
Yeah.
That's a tough one because it's one of those I know it when I hear it instead of describing what it is.
The Scalia defense.
The Scalia defense, yeah. I'm nothing if not tactful. Yeah, that's a hard one. I can't think of anything right now. But definitely with this in the same category of so Trump's really awful, don't you think? Yeah, that's clearly an obvious leading question. Well, you're not a climate change denier, are you? Yeah. Another clear leading question. Or you support gay rights, right? Clearly another leading question.
Yes.
Some are more obvious than others. Other ones you just have to stop and think, well, I'm not quite sure about that. But
Yeah.
I say as a general rule of thumb, if somebody is confrontational with you, that's not a good sign.
No, obviously.
Not at all, regardless of what the question is.
Yeah.
Okay, so then they say, continuing about rapport, you build rapport immediately in the conversation. If you do not know someone, here are a few obvious initial questions to begin this rapport building process. Hi, my name is X, how are you? Nice to meet you, I'm X, what's your name? Can you say more about why that's important to you? What got you interested in that? How do you spend most of your free time? What do you like to be called? Where'd you learn about that? Okay. Fairly innocuous questions. Then you find common ground. Okay. So this one, I think sometimes is really difficult to try to find common ground. And so I ask you guys, what are some ways you get to identifying something with common ground? Now, I know in my experience that questions that I tend not to answer, I certainly don't answer political questions, I don't answer religious questions, and I really don't like answering sports-related questions. So what do you think of the Bears? What do you think of the Washington Redskins? Eh, Dusty? Questions like that, because I don't follow sports. I really don't have an interest in sports, and I know it's kind of a small talk question, but that's not going to find common ground. And I find it difficult because you don't know unless you ask a series of questions. Maybe you're lucky in the first question, you hit it off, but then you go through 10 separate questions, you find, oh, okay, so this guy likes Hemingway too. I didn't quite get that in the beginning. So I'd like to hear what your guys' experience has been and how many questions you've asked to really find common ground to allow the conversation to progress.
Well, for me, like, I guess one way that I sometimes find common ground with people is like if I'm criticizing some like left-wing person or idea or something, and I know that the person I'm talking to has left-wing political views, or it seems obvious that they do. I try to clarify that I agree with left-wing people on these particular issues or something like that, but I think that the way they're going about this doesn't make sense, so I try to establish common ground a little bit with political views, but I guess like it's obviously different depending on the medium and on the type of conversation, right? Like on social media, it's harder to do that way. Like in real life, I might ask like, hey, what do you like to do for fun? Oh, hey, I like reading books too. What type of books do you like to read? That sort of thing.
Well, how many times has anybody ever asked you the question, what do you like to do for fun?
That's mostly like
Never.
on dating apps or something like that.
Okay. Dusty, you're laughing, so I'm sure maybe somebody at some point in the distant past has asked you that question. But they tend not to ask you that question when you're just it's in the getting to know you phase. People just go to the, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? What do you do? What do you do is a very common question. And seldom does it ever get to some kind of a common ground or something that you're interested in talking to. Now, that's a lot of that is because the other person doesn't know you. Andrew, I wanted to go to your point about on social media. I would think, and Reed, maybe you can jump in here because you were the first one to bring it up, that one would think in a closed group, a structured group, that there already is the common ground. Is there ever a case where people don't quite know what to say even though they're in a structured group?
I don't know, because I believe in those cases, if you're kind of in a purposed group, there's going to be some type of common ground, right?
Yeah. I mean, let's look at mixed mental arts. Now, mixed mental arts is not like the Joe Rogan group, which is quite open. But mixed mental arts is fairly open. But it's supposed to be structured to a certain degree. And I wonder if there are the same difficulties that exist in mixed mental arts because it is fairly open and not so structured as, say, a street epistemology group would be. Or, Andrew, if we had our own delusional group, or we're only going to talk about delus when you come in there.
That's really specifically structured, yeah.
That's really specifically structured, yeah. So it's going to be a lot easier to do that versus something like a mixed mental arts. No, I don't religiously follow mixed mental arts, and I may have put 2 posts in there, and it seems like the same people are posting all the time, Andrew.
Yeah.
among other people, and there's how many people that's in the group, but it's just doesn't. I don't know. It seems to strike me as one of those specific Facebook phenomena where there's a group or you want to invite as many people as possible to chat, and it's kind of the same people posting, and it seems unstructured. Maybe because people are not really that interested, or they're just joining to join, things like that. I didn't want this to go off on a criticism of Facebook.
Actually, I was thinking of a few examples as you were talking there. Like I've talked to there have been a few people I've talked to, like from mixed mental arts, who I've invited to talk with me on Mindgasms, who have said no, or I've had to convince them to talk with me because they don't feel like they're experts enough or something like that. Even though it's always about subjects on which I also am not an expert. I'm just interested in them and want to learn more. Or like one time I had to convince someone because they have political views that they know a lot of people don't like, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go ahead and run with that. How are you able to build rapport with those people to get them to talk with you offline, away from mixed mental arts?
Well, like,
or could you?
Yeah, I would say so. Like with the political example, I would say, like, well, I disagree. I don't like this politician that you like, but I understand why some people do like them, and like I explain that I'm open to talking with people who have those ideas because I'm interested in why someone would support that type of political ideology. And then in terms of other things, like one of them, this happened once or twice, I think, with someone who I asked to talk about philosophy. They said that they weren't enough of an expert. So I said, I'm not an expert either. I just like reading about this stuff, and I like learning about it. And it seems like you're really interested in this, and it seems like you're even more interested than I am. So I think it would be really interesting if, like, we could both do this and we can both learn about it, or something like that.
Okay. So you definitely were open, extended an invitation, and I guess there was enough to go on with the other person where you could try to find a piece of common ground, or something they mentioned, and you could say, I really would like to talk with you more about X because you had mentioned it in the post earlier in the week, and then I would like to invite you to talk about this offline. And I understand that you're adding some qualifiers. I understand that you might be hesitant, or you don't think you're an expert, or you're that informed well enough, and then you're like, well, neither am I. I'm just trying to do this to foster a conversation. So I would think that's also adding into trying to build rapport. Reed, what do you think? You although what you're doing in the format of the conversation is you're allowing the person to come there and sit down, and then there's a specific list of questions, because I've seen Peter Boghossian doing this now. We're choosing from a list of questions, and then you use that as the stopping off as the spur for the conversation. But have you ever done it in a conversation before where you're just like, look, I'm not an expert on this too. I just want to take this topic and I want to move forward. Have you ever done that to kind of build rapport? You understand what I mean?
Yeah, a little bit. When Pete did his conversations, we came up with a bunch of questions, and they weren't topics or questions that he had expertise in. I've got a bunch more videos of his to edit, and he readily admits his ignorance on a bunch of different things, and the same goes for me. Sometimes I just find what's trending on Twitter and put up a question about it, and just have someone sit down and talk about it, because I try to admit that I don't know too much about the topic myself as well. We'll just think about it and talk about it.
So would you agree that that's a good strategy to build rapport, is you can admit your own ignorance and humility?
Definitely, yeah.
One thing I have to, just for the audience sake, because I don't know if they know exactly what we're talking about. If you don't know, Reed has been helping Peter Boghossian produce some of these videos, so that's what he's talking about. That because I don't think we didn't properly introduce you, Reed. So people were like, "Huh, what's going on here?" So do you want to talk about specifically what you've been doing with Peter Boghossian?
Sure. Yeah. I have my hobby, my YouTube channel, Cordial Curiosity. I go out to public parks in LA, and I met up with Peter earlier this year before the book came out, and asked if he'd like to use my setup that I do to record some conversations, so he could show off the techniques from the book. And that happened in early September, and we recorded 2 days, got a bunch of conversations. About 5 or 6 are now up on his YouTube channel, or a new YouTube channel called New Discourses. That's the channel where they're all they'll end up on. So that's what I've been doing with him.
Yeah, I thought that was so cool when Dusty told me that, because I didn't know that.
I don't think anybody knew it. I was watching the Peter's videos, and it's like, hey, that's Reed. Reed always seems to sneak into like things that he doesn't say that he's been a part of.
Yeah.
It's like, I was like, oh, there's Reed again.
Yeah.
Oh, look, Reed was here at this place.
Yeah. Reed is phenomenally humble.
That's right. Instead of Kilroy was here, Reed was here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So back to the list here about rapport. So
one thing about rapport, because I have not said this, and I talk to a bunch of random people. That's part of my job, literally.
Okay.
But I have a cheat code.
Hey, all right. Everybody listen up. Cheat codes are good.
Well, this is a cheat code that somebody who does client and customer relations. It's not a cheat code that a random person can use off the street. But my cheat codes are, I take calls from clients, and I have accounts that get pulled up. I get to see where they're from. I get to see what kind of products that they purchase. Okay. So I'm able to build rapport based off of things like that. So if you're in the industry where you talk to customers, you take calls and things of that nature, and you're looking to build rapport, there's lots of ways to do it. There's cheat codes for you there. If you pull up a client's account, you get to see all this information, and you can look at that information and connect with the client in some way. You can find some common ground there. A lot of times, I see that you like guitars, or I see that you're from so-and-so place. I worked there 3 years ago, or something like that. So that's just a cheat code if you're like in the retail space, I guess.
Okay.
But that doesn't quite work with strangers on the street. But lots of people work in a client customer situation, so That's also a good way. And most places where you do this type of work, they actually train you with that in mind. So this is probably not new information either to people who work in this industry, but there you go.
Yeah, very helpful.
Okay.
So if anybody works in sales in those kind of channels, if you can get preliminary information on a customer, client, then you could use that to spur the conversation, to try to find the common ground. All right. Good advice, Dusty.
Yes.
Okay, so back to the list. So number 3 was find common ground. Number 4, do not parallel talk, which is taking something someone says and using that to reference yourself or your experiences. For example, if someone tells you they just got back from Cuba, don't start talking about the time you went to Cuba. Ask them about their experience in Cuba. Don't make their stories about your life. Parallel talk damages rapport.
Yeah.
I think everybody's been guilty of that several times. Oh, yeah, I've been there too.
Yeah, very guilty of that.
Yeah, you like strawberry ice cream? I like strawberry ice cream too.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So definitely something to keep in mind. Do not parallel talk.
Or like, my mom was telling me about this last week. She went to her book club, and she had just realized that she developed another chronic health condition, and she already has many. And most of the people at her book club just gave her a lot of emotional support. But there was one person who said, "Oh yeah, I had this other health problem before too, and it was less severe." And she just thought, "Well, okay."
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Okay.
He didn't give any tips, so it's just, it was less severe.
Yeah.
It's just less severe, yeah. Well, that doesn't help me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So then number 5, you invest in the relationship independent of your political views. Okay, that's a no-brainer right there. Number 6, engage in substantive conversation only if you're willing to make time. Okay, do not rush and do not hit and run. If you can't substantively engage someone else's ideas, leave it for a time when you can.
For sure.
That's interesting.
Okay, do tell, Dusty.
Well, I think social media is designed around the opposite of that.
Yes,
For sure.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Because you could take as long as you want to respond to something, and you could even respond to something days later or weeks later. I've done that before. But yeah, there are times when it's a really heated conversation, and I'm like checking back every 5 minutes to see if there's a response. Because there's sometimes when something gets heated like that, you're expecting, a prompt back and forth. But the way that social media is designed, I guess you can't really get upset if that doesn't happen.
Right. But again, that goes back to that distanciation type of thing. So if you, Dusty, make a post, or actually somebody makes a post and you respond to that post, say a week later because you forgot about it and you're just now getting around to it, you respond to that, the person might see the response and then get upset because you didn't respond to it right then and there when they made it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, one thing I do in terms of that is like, for social media, I just get so many notifications that I'm always behind on them. So if someone comments on something I posted yesterday, I might not see it for another week or two.
Yeah, for sure. Reed, question for you on your conversations. You have a time limit, right? And how long you talk with them?
I do. I usually have this little sand timer that's for 5 minutes, and after the rapport, and we really focus on a topic, then I'll ask them to flip over the egg timer for the sand timer for 5 minutes, and once it's out, I try to acknowledge it. and then have them flip it over if they want to continue.
Okay, so what's the longest you've gone in a conversation?
Well over an hour, I'm sure. Maybe an hour to hour and 10 minutes or so.
So although you have the egg timer, it's kind of an open-ended conversation, or could be. You're not. You gotta. Everybody's gotta get everything out and have a discussion within 10 minutes, type of thing. That's a severe time pressure that doesn't exist for that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But even though it could go up to an hour, and we'll say that it's fairly open-ended that way. Does anybody feel the pressure that they have to say certain things, or say them in a certain way, or say them concisely, and then that could potentially derail the conversation or make it more difficult than it should be?
Maybe. They know they're being recorded, and I've also started live streaming every once in a while, so that may add additional stress, but it's hard to read their mind. I don't know.
Okay. Do you think that affects rapport?
I don't know. It's usually people are used to seeing cameras, and everybody has a camera on their cell phone now, so it's not too big a deal nowadays.
Okay. How about the time constraint, if there is one? Or, again, they probably just don't think about it because, okay, I'll just turn the egg timer over, and I really like this conversation. It's like a tennis match, back and forth. It's my turn, your turn, my turn.
Mm-hmm. I think it gives people a little at ease knowing that there is a time that they can get up and walk away, without being rude. So that, I don't know. It could help rapport, could hurt it. I don't know.
Okay.
So do you think that those shorter conversations are easier to allow you to have productive conversations for your goals than doing like hour or 2 hour or some super long podcasts or something like that, like this?
Yeah. We usually get to a place, like the average length is usually 15 minutes for a video or a conversation. And usually by 10 minutes, someone has thought of something or in a place where they're thinking. And I think at the end of this chapter, it's like when to walk away. That's another thing to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And when to walk away is like when someone is just ready to reflect on something. We don't want to like overwhelm them with a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That reminds me of what I had said a couple different times in our delusional, Andrew, about these kind of things that you get stuck on. It's like, well, you have to ponder it and sit with it for a while.
For sure.
Yeah, because it's an insight. You just wait a minute. Just like we did with the Whitehead episode.
Yeah.
An imminent God. Ooh, that really gets the neurons firing. But to really flesh it out within the course of that episode, and it was a fairly short one, it's really not something you could do because you're just like, I never really thought of it that way. Mm-hmm. I got to sit and think an imminent God, and because I'm so used to thinking about transcendental God and things like that. Yeah, it is one of those things.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why it was really fascinating to me. And like I said, I was telling a lot of people about that, and like I was sort of through explaining the concept to at least a few or a handful of people, it helped me understand it better. That's what I often find. If I'm explaining something to someone, it helps me understand it myself better.
Yeah. You have a firm grasp on a concept, so the saying goes, when you can teach it to somebody else. Yeah.
I was thinking too, in terms of what we were just talking about leaving the conversation when someone once someone has reached a point of reflection. I was thinking about how, like, the importance of having an open mind, which especially on social media and in terms of politics in particular, people often don't seem to have an open mind. And I think I was telling Dusty about this on one of our episode last week or something like that, I was telling someone about how I was at like a New Year's Eve party, and I got into a conversation with a creationist, and I was basically for most of the time I was just asking him a whole bunch of questions like, how do you know that? Where do you get that idea? Does in your mind, does evolution being the wrong theory, why does that mean creationism is the right theory? And a whole bunch of questions like that. And by the end of that, he said, you really made me realize that I have to kind of think about these things a little bit more. And I said, oh, wow, okay, well, cool.
That's a very Canadian response.
A. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I was surprised because I wasn't being antagonistic, but I think that's what helps, not being antagonistic.
Yeah. Yeah, and that leads to the next item on the list, number 7. Be ready to talk about something else.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get into a sticky situation, then you just shift gears and you go off on another topic.
Yeah, there's one big example I could think of that totally failed that test, and that was what Sam Harris calls the worst podcast ever.
Oh, that 3-hour-long one with what was his name? No, it was
not the Jordan Peterson one, the other one.
Oh, that guy, yeah, I remember.
Wait, who is that? I don't think I know this one.
It was one of the guys who like shit all over him on articles that he wrote about him or something like that.
It was like a Salon.com writer who had criticized Sam's view of Islam, and
Omar Aziz.
Yes.
there you go.
Yeah.
Omar Aziz.
So basically, I think more than half of the conversation, they were like stuck on 1 or 2 sentences that the guy wrote.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get past that. Sam especially couldn't get past it.
He's bad at doing that.
Sam is? Yeah, I kind of noticed that.
Well, you were just. It sounded like you were about to mention his first conversation with Jordan Peterson too, where they were both talking past each other in that episode. So it's similar in that way. Yeah.
I understand that, because at least that was the topic. Was basically their whole discussion, and I get that he was trying to establish something before moving on, but the other one, they could have well moved on to further down in the piece that they were trying to criticize.
Yeah. I don't remember that whole conversation that well, but I just remember what it was like in general. That they couldn't move past anything, like you were saying.
Yeah, the Peterson one too. That's definitely a good example.
Yeah.
No. Okay, number 8. Avoid call-outs except for severe infractions. For example, moral instruction. You should do this or you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Calling someone out, especially midstream in their thought, damages rapport.
For sure.
I have a good example of that recently, and I did call someone out. This is not online or anything.
Okay.
So I had a customer. They were calling because they wanted to return some cat food. They said their cat was getting sick. It's been eating cat food for a while, and they don't know what's going on.
I remember.
And the lady was like, well, let me take a look at this cat food, because, hey, if there's something really bad with it, I don't want anybody else purchasing this stuff. So I look at it, it's like, oh, this is vegan cat food?
Ew.
And I was like, I'm not sure you're really supposed to feed that to cats. I don't really think that's a good idea. And she actually agreed with me, which was interesting. And I was like, well, yeah, that's not a good idea to feed your cat that. I'll be honest. Like, take a look at those reviews. Like, a lot of people
Having problems with
vegan
that.
cat food.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a product of the internet age.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I couldn't help but call that out. I had to say something there.
Okay.
Well,
Well, at least she agreed with you.
Yeah.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
what
in
was
that
surprising.
situation-
I was not expecting agreement, but I just had to say something about it.
Okay. Well,
I
in
think-
that situation, would you have were you trying to avoid Amazon suffering consequences if she didn't agree with you or something like that?
Well, I didn't. Well, one, there were going to be some type of consequences anyway, because one, she's returning the product, so there's going to be some type of monetary loss somewhere along the production chain. But I was not trying to avoid like liability or anything when I was telling her not to eat that or not to feed that to her cat. I was just saying that from a personal perspective of telling her I didn't think that was a good idea and that she shouldn't be feeding that to her cat. But I bet she was like the 10% of the 90%. I feel like if I had the other 90, there would be a staunch defense on why they were feeding their cat that food.
Okay, well, this is a perfect opportunity, Dusty, to apply street epistemology. So if you had told this woman, no, I don't think it's a good idea for you to feed your cat vegan cat food, because you could give a reason is that aren't cats carnivores and that's how they evolved and they hunt mice, things like that. And then she flips out and thinking, how dare you, don't tell me what I can feed my cat or not feed my cat and blah, blah, blah. So how would you have handled that?
I would
Applying
have
street
just,
epistemology.
I probably would have just used personal experience or referred to the product reviews. Because clearly the product had probably like 25% one-star reviews. So if she didn't listen to me, I just said, well, I just tell her a lot of people are having problems with this product, and 25% one-star reviews is quite high. And that's, I would say more than 50% of the reviews were actually negative. So we're talking about 2-star and less. So, it's like, well, the reviews are there. I'm just letting you know a lot of people are having problems with this food. You're not the only one. And it's hard because, one, Amazon is not always responsible for the products that are sold. It's not like Amazon is basically a mall. And Amazon has its own store in this mall.
You know what somebody had said on a podcast what Amazon is?
Wow.
It's the 21st century version of the Sears and Roebuck catalog.
Not really. It is and it's not. It's like
slightly different, but the concept is kind of in the same ballpark.
Well, I'm saying as I'm talking about like the responsibility.
Sure, yeah.
So if Amazon owns the mall and there's this store at the mall that is selling like these really bad products, it's like, okay, there's this store at our mall, but if you really want to resolve the issue, you have to talk to that store, not the owner of the mall.
Yeah.
We don't have as much responsibility for the quality of that product as they think we do.
Right. Amazon is just a distributor. They are not the seller.
Not both. So Amazon is a mall. We do have a store at that mall.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the items at that mall are from other stores.
Right. Okay. Well, back to the example. If you had told the woman, well, if you just look at the reviews, at most you're getting a 1-star review. So what that tells me, you speaking as Dusty, what that tells me is this is not a good product. And I would take that as a clue, perhaps, that you should return it and look at something else, and she still would dig in her heels. Then what? No, we're using this as a teachable moment about what to do here.
Well, I think at that point it would be very difficult to win the person back. I think I was definitely taking a gamble with expressing my view in that way. Really, the only reason I took a gamble in that way is because I love cats. It sounds stupid. Of course, if you've watched any comedy special, a black guy loving cats must be gay. That's not the case.
Really?
Here.
I've never even heard that before.
I think it was a Chappelle. It wasn't either Chappelle or I think it was Chappelle's special that he said that.
Oh, I must have forgotten that joke.
Oh.
Somebody said it. I was like, that's funny. What was it, Brian? Oh, yeah, it was Brian Callen. That's right. It was Brian Callen who said that joke in his most recent special. So, well, anyway, like, I like cats. That's kind of like a sticking point with me when I find out that someone is treating their cat poorly.
So if you had mentioned something that you were a cat lover to this woman, you probably could have, as you said, you lucked out because she was one of the 10% of people who were reasonable, that you could marshal facts and tell her that, number one, well, first it's an opinion, that you don't think this is a good idea, and then if she had dug her heels in, say something about the review, so then you marshal facts. But if you had said at the beginning, well, as a cat lover myself, I don't think that's a good idea. So you're trying to establish common ground, and I wonder if she had been difficult, if that would have swayed her.
Well, yeah, you're making a really good point, that if I was unlucky, that probably establishing that common ground would have maybe helped me if she was the 90%. I just got lucky.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is definitely probably a tactic I could think about. Because it was kind of like a knee-jerk reaction when I heard what she was telling me.
Yeah.
And I really didn't consider to probably soften that interaction by letting her know that we're kind of coming from the same space here as cat lovers.
Right. And there's no way in hell that you would ever feed your cat vegan cat food.
Oh, hell no. That's insane.
That's right. That's cruel and unusual punishment even for a cat.
Yeah. Like, if you feed a cat dog food, and the thing is, cats will actually eat dog food, they will get severe health issues.
Because it's not formulated for them.
No, not at all. And neither really is vegan cat food. Because the bag was vegan cat/dog food. Oh no, that's even worse.
That's even worse. Yeah. But we won't get into that too much. All right, so then the last one on the list is be courteous, saying please and thank you, and I appreciate that. Things like that. Okay. So those are the tactics they cite to build a rapport. Let's go ahead to listen. Okay, listening in terms of your own experiences. If you do not listen, you cannot understand, and if you cannot understand, there is no conversation. So then they give a list of best practices. Number 1, go. No, you go. Go. No, you go. If you start to speak at the same time as someone else, don't continue speaking and instead say, go ahead. If they say, no, you go, respond, that's okay, you go, and let them speak.
I wouldn't say I have a lot of trouble in that. In that, there's two things that can happen. When two people try to initiate speech at the same time. And then there's the other thing that can happen where someone is talking and then someone cuts in. That is something that I have trouble with quite a bit, especially if the argument is heated. But I think that allowing the other person to speak, because I think this whole book really is trying to train people to be listeners. and not talkers. So I think that is actually really good advice.
Yeah. Reed, I was going to ask you, what percentage of your conversations is it where, the person sits down across from you and they say, okay, so this is what we're going to be doing. This is the purpose of why I'm here. You're giving them all the preliminary information. Then you pick the topic and you say, you go ahead. And then they just take it and they run with it.
Haha. That happens sometimes. Some people just talk and they like to hear themselves talk.
Yeah.
I'd say maybe 5% that people are like super talkative. They just keep talking and there's no like pause, way for me to like, interject. Because I usually just listen for as long as people want to talk.
Right.
And then that's just like for a long time. I'd like to ask some questions. But not that it's not too big of a problem, no.
Okay. What would you say is the most common?
The most common in terms of people talking.
If when they sit down and you're about to conduct the conversation, what does it look like? What's very common?
Once we pick a topic, they'll restate what we're talking about, and then I'll get into first like what their confidence is, and then we'll get to definitions. That's usually how it goes, and then we'll get to a main reason and examples for that reason, reliability of the reasoning. That's the typical trajectory.
Okay, and that proceeds more or less smoothly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say so.
Do you have to actually? I think I might have seen you do this on your channel sometimes. Do you sometimes take notes to avoid interrupting people if they're talking for a long time? Because I try to do that, like especially on live streams or something like that. Sometimes if someone brings up a whole bunch of points and I want to address each one of them, but I don't want to finish them before they're done talking.
Yeah, I do have my iPad in front of me, and I'm pretty good at figuring out the keywords of like types of categories of reasons, and then specific examples they're using for the reasons. I just do short notes. Yeah.
By the way, Andrew, I wanted to make a comment is that I think you've gotten a little bit better, but you still have something to work on when we're doing our podcast of interrupting me when I'm in the middle of a long passage.
Yeah, I do that sometimes.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, sometimes like in particular, if you use those words that philosophers invent,
those highfalutin words,
yeah, those ones in particular, I've trouble not interrupting and saying like, what the hell does that word mean?
Yeah,
man, Tim, you got to avoid those call-outs, man.
That's right, I do. But I also, what I try to do is that if there's a philosophical term, I will stop and they say, here's what the definition is before we continue.
Yeah, you do that more now than you did at first too, actually.
Yeah, because I found my groove.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so you go. Number 2, look directly at someone and turn your body toward them. Okay, that's good. That's another good rapport building skill. Direct eye contact, you're facing them instead of facing away from them. Number 3, unless your partner is searching for a word and you know it, do not finish their sentences. Listen, do not jump in to speak before having heard and processed what they're saying. Listen.
I think I would say there's an exception to that.
Okay.
And the exception is when you know that the person is struggling and they expressly state, you know which word I'm talking about? Like when they phrase it to you in a question. I think that's when you could do it. But other way, you can't unless they're asking specifically for your help in finding that word. Like, what's the word for this that I'm thinking about? And I think that's when you can do that, but otherwise, no.
Yeah, that's another thing that I noticed in the book. That is another thing that I should work on, because often, like I think I did that with you earlier in this conversation, Dusty. You were struggling for a word and I just interjected and said it.
I don't even remember because I
don't
always
remember what it was.
struggle. I always struggle with words, so I actually expect help most of the time.
Okay.
So it doesn't bother me, but I don't know if it would if it was a person I didn't really know. But if that is the case, then I think the advice is still sound there because we know each other. So, but if it's someone you don't know, I don't know if they would appreciate that or not.
Yeah. You run the risk of offending somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So number 4, pause. Pauses are crucial moments when people reflect. Do not rush to fill them. Pauses may build trust and rapport while offering you a chance to understand your partner's reasoning. Okay. I think that's kind of a self-explanatory one.
I have a few
So
examples.
is that dead air? Is that what they're talking about?
Well, pausing to give the impression is that you've actually are processing. You know, you've listened to what the person has said. You don't rush to judgment. You stop and you think, all right, so he's saying this. I think he's saying this. I want to make sure he is saying this. If I'm not sure, maybe that I can ask a follow-up question. And Reed, you said you had some examples?
Yeah, I was just at Politicon 2 weekends ago, and also have one from Peter himself. So here's a few examples.
Okay.
You think of one?
We don't have the audio yet.
You don't hear
I
the
don't know.
audio? Can you hear that at all?
It sounds like it, yeah.
You can hear it?
I
It
think
is
so.
pausing, so it's not that much to hear. And then I think this is the longest pause we've recorded. This happened at Politicon. It's pretty interesting.
What's getting you to 99%? What is the method that you're doing that's making you 99% confident that a God exists? So you're trying to get one that I can name you. The chief method has been reason, but there's also the
That's what you call a pregnant pause.
For sure. Just keeps going.
Wow.
Even switch the camera angle there.
Wow.
The wheels are turning.
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
Yes.
I would definitely say reason
Yeah,
kind of thing
very
is
cool.
showing there are the chief things.
Yeah, there's a few examples there.
Okay.
That was an excellent example.
So those long pauses, Reed, would you say that that's indicative of you've really hit pay dirt with the person's beliefs and they're really going over it thoroughly in their head?
Yeah, I think if someone wanted to scientifically study SE, I think that would be an empirical metric. Like
Okay.
one of the top empirical metrics they would look at is the amount of pause time.
Okay.
That's something we look at for sure.
Okay. Now, I couldn't see the video, so was the person doing the look to the left and the right, you know, as they say, what happens with the eyes when they're accessing information in the brain or processing, or were they just looking at you dumbstruck?
Yeah, one clue is like people usually look up, like they're looking at like a spider on the ceiling.
Yeah.
I
and
do
they're just
that
kinda
all the
stuck there.
time.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's a huge clue.
Yes. So there is life in Andrew's brain after all.
Well, the majority of any video that you see Andrew is usually looking at the sky.
Yeah.
So I was
He's
like,
processing. Good for him.
I almost feel like you need to change the angle of your camera so that we see your eyes more than your chin. But
Yeah.
that's just me.
All right. Yeah, pause. Very important. Number 5, if you find yourself distracted by something in your immediate environment, either turn your back toward the distraction or explicitly identify what's distracting to you.
I say that doesn't always work.
Okay.
And that's if like someone with kids or a kid if your kid does something distracting, you're probably going to have to say something to the kid, unfortunately.
Sure. Reed, in the conversations that you have, how often are people distracted by something?
Not too often. We are usually on a hiking trail, and at Runyon Canyon, there's like so many people bring their dogs, and sometimes dogs bark or get in a fight, but it's not too distracting.
Okay. All right. Number 6. If you're unclear about what someone means, place the burden of understanding upon yourself. At a pause point in the discussion, say, "I'm not sure I understand. Can you explain that?" Avoid saying, "That was unclear," or "That doesn't make sense," and especially, "You were unclear."
Yeah.
I'd say I have a big problem with telling people that they don't make sense.
It's okay. It's okay,
too.
Dusty. You're in like company with me. Sometimes I have that problem too. But Reed, I'm just curious. Why do you think that it's better to say, "I'm not sure I understand. Can you explain that?" instead of "That was unclear"? What's your opinion on that?
It just takes so much pressure off. Like if the burden is on like the person giving the interview, then it's not a problem with the person talking. It's like it's just something that's being wrong with the interviewer. Like they're mishearing. It just takes the pressure off.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay. Number 7. The moment you sense fear, frustration, anger, outrage, or disgust from your conversation partner, pay attention to the specific words she uses. One of the best ways to sort out feelings, especially in strained conversations, is to listen and acknowledge them as soon as possible.
I'm allowing those pauses. I'm adhering to the book here.
Tim does that a lot. It's very effective.
Dramatic pauses?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What insights do you have, Dusty?
You don't want to hear them because they have nothing to do with.
Or are you dreaming of that vegan cat
No,
food
I was
again?
I was just thinking about it's something that's personal, and I don't really want to talk about it.
Okay. All right.
Well, it's just.
I hear your frustration, Dusty.
No,
Your
it's
apprehension.
just like these are just things I think about when speaking to a significant other.
Okay.
'Cause I'm looking at this book too, and I can see that there's definitely things I can glean from it that will work when you're talking to a loved one and trying to de-escalate situations. Not necessarily de-escalate, but prevent an escalation from happening. Because that's what seems that this part is about. But no, I was just thinking about a stupid argument I had. But I'm not gonna put that on blast though.
Okay.
My wife was complaining about this thing.
And then there was a pause. And then I left the room. All right. Number 8. If you start to fade or find yourself distracted when someone is talking to you, look them directly in the eyes and state, "I'm sorry. Can you please repeat that?" Fairly self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number 9. If you and your partner accidentally speak at the same time, and your partner continues while you remain silent and listen, when you resume the conversation, do not do so with the words that caused the interruption.
I think that's a signaling thing. Because I do that. That's the problem.
Okay. Can you give an example?
Well, like, say we're both going to say something, and then it feels like if you're going to go right back into the thing that you're going to say, it just appears as if you weren't listening to what the person had said, that you were just kind of holding on to what you were going to say, and you're just kind of dismissing it. You're dismissing that person's input and instead just injecting what you were going to say anyway.
Yeah, that's a common problem I've heard, where instead of actively listening, you're just waiting for the person to finish so you can interject. You're just waiting your turn.
Mm-hmm.
You already know what you're going to say. You're just looking for the opportunity to say it.
Yeah, it's a big problem I have, and especially when I just want to throw a joke in. I'm like, and then you throw it in too late, and then it's like, that was just kind of wasted effort.
Yeah, don't quit your day job. Type of delivery.
That's
A common-
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Reed.
Interesting metaphor we try to use when thinking about ESI conversations is like we're passengers in a car where the person we're talking to is driving. So we're passive and we're just asking them questions. Whoa, why'd you go that way? Why'd you go this way? So we're not actively driving the conversation.
Yeah. That's something I want to practice more too. I was just gonna say that I think that one thing that I've gotten better at, just from doing these podcasts and stuff like that, especially since I used to be much more awkward and insecure about communicating. Like when I first started recording myself, I was really insecure about it, and I think I've gotten better at that, and I've also gotten better at, like, when someone, like, if we're doing an episode about really complex philosophy, for example, Tim, or like if I'm talking with Hayden about that or something, I try to, like, repeat what you just said in my own words in, like, a more concise way to try to make sure that I understand it or something like that.
Yeah, summarizing is always a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's definitely a tactic taught for my other job, that you got to make sure that you understand why this person wants to talk to you.
Right.
And you got to make sure by summarizing the issue back to them.
Right.
So, yeah, that's definitely something I use in my profession.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So number 10, do not pull out your phone when you are having a conversation. Well, that's a no-brainer. And number 11, say "I hear you" to acknowledge you're listening.
I hear you.
I hear you too.
I don't know, that just sounds such an, I don't know, it depends, right?
Yeah.
Because there's, like, different ways to say it.
Dusty, I hear you're being contradictory, so please continue.
Yeah, you hear me, yeah.
I hear you, yeah.
No, it really depends, because there's, I don't know, like, I'm sure there are ways that it could be said where it sounds creepy, or ways that it could be said where that's kind of part of a specific vernacular in the United States. But, I don't know. Me saying that, I hear you, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sounds
Yeah,
weird.
this is one of the examples in the book that sort of gave me the intuition when I read them, that, I don't know, like, some of these phrases sometimes, if you phrase them exactly the way verbatim they have them in the book, it might be really easy for the other person to interpret them as you trying to be manipulative or, like, psychoanalyze them or something like that.
Okay.
Well, that and the "I hear you," like, if you're, I don't know, because if the person that you're speaking to doesn't think you're sincere, it might negatively affect you. Like for instance, there's a tone, of course. So when you say that, I'm assuming they want you to have a very specific tone in mind.
Right.
Yeah, it's got to be authentic.
Yeah. We'll read during your conversations. I'm not sure how often you say "I hear you." Or do you have an equivalent phrase that you say, or maybe like, yeah, I understand, please continue, something like that, just to show authenticity and to keep it going?
Yeah, I try to use this other technique called minimal encouragers, which is just small, like yeah, or just repeating the very last thing people say. But I'm not very good at like I can hear you, or I hear you, that type of thing.
To me, I hear you sounds like something you would say when someone is like pouring their heart out to you, or they have like a major complaint, or but I don't see that as a universal thing to throw out. I really think it does depend on like the person and what really they're talking about.
Yeah, well, I would go with what Reed had said about minimal encouragers, which I think is reflexive enough anyway during conversations. I mean, we've been doing this often during this one.
Yeah, because I know Hunter's is like, yep, and he shakes his head really quickly. That's just one I find weird. I know it works, but whenever I was editing the podcast videos, I did emphasize those unnecessarily.
Oh, okay.
I hear you, Dusty.
No, because I like to mess. I'm a troll basically, because I know Reed's been the subject of some of my trolling. I don't know if he remembers, but I think there was a podcast we recorded, and there's like some technical issues that happened, and then in like colorful letters I put "Thanks, Reed Nice Wonder," because he was the one who recorded it, but he had like nothing to do with it at all because it was some type of internet problem. But
yeah.
he knows what I'm talking. And I even I'm so stupid. This is how trolly I am. I even messed up the thing more beyond what actually happened. Because I am a troll, and I guess the troll part of me, that's something that's very hard to suppress. I think it's easy to suppress in person, but harder to suppress anonymously, or even when you're just not having face-to-face conversations.
Well, do you think that it's a little different if it's something like what you described, though? Because, presumably, correct me if I'm wrong, Reed, but you probably understand that he's, joking with those sort of things.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. He has to go through all that effort to, edit that in. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, I spent 15 minutes on nonsense. So in a way, it's actually the opposite. It's oh wow, he's giving me 15 minutes of his time. Look at that.
He hears you.
Right.
Yeah, I hear you, Reed.
Yeah.
I think I can do the next section, the shoot your messenger part.
Sure, go ahead.
Right before you do that, I think I know why I have the problem with "I hear you." To me, it's like the word "grok."
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I grok what you're saying. To me, it's just, I don't know. It doesn't seem that natural to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on Hangouts, if you click my face, it should show the screen the entire time. If it doesn't, so this should work. Hopefully, can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Make sure this is right. Cool. So I have the audiobook, and I took out little snippets, so we can hear it straight from Pete himself.
The research literature on effective communication shows that delivering messages does not work. This is because messengers don't speak across political and moral divides, or even converse. They deliver messages. Conversations are exchanges. Messages are information conveyed in one-way transactions. Messengers espouse beliefs and assume their audience will listen and ultimately embrace their conclusions.
Yeah, thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. It's not obvious when people are were discussing things, because whether the way they were trained or they're really not aware of this, they're delivering messages. Not all the time, but at least part of the time they are delivering a message. And Pete's right, when you're delivering a message, it's a one-way avenue instead of a conversation which is supposed to be a back and forth.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's... Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just... no, you go.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say that you noticed that in particular on like social media conversations, like people are just trading messages with each other. This is my proclamation. Yeah, well, this is my proclamation.
Yeah, I was going to actually say just basically the same thing that you just said. And another way to not really start a good conversation is to start a conversation with a message. I see that as a problem. Like lately, one of the things that I kind of have trouble with is the use of jokes versus being straight and neutral. Like I just cannot resist joking about some things because I like to share laughs with people if possible. But if I do not want to do that, I think it's really important if you want to start a topic or to start a conversation is to pose the conversation in a neutral tone. Not like, I guess there's also some issues too when you're reading like a news headline. Anytime there's a question, the answer is no. in the news headline, I try to avoid that too. But one of the things is this is just something I'm trying to do more, is to pose a neutral point of conversation without injecting what my opinion might be about that specific topic.
Yeah, I think I was saying earlier and that's something that I want to work on too. I just have I have this real strong intuition to always want to inject my own opinions.
Well, sometimes it's unavoidable. And what I was going to say, what definitely pops, it screams at me almost, reading Pete's words, is this not really what the fundamental problem of Facebook is?
Yeah.
If a conversation is supposed to be a two-way, does Facebook work against that? Because when you post something, you've put a message out there. Even if you're trying to be neutral, or you're trying to say a joke, something like that, you're still posting a message, and could be a one-way. Somebody posts something back, that's another message. Then you post a response to that back, that's another message. See what I'm getting at?
Yeah. Yeah, like you're not there at the same time because you're staring at your phone or your computer, and then someone else is there in a separate place doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, here's another section.
Delivering a message feels like teaching, whereas a conversation has give and take that rewards with learning. If you find yourself thinking, if they only understood this point, they'd change their mind, you're delivering a message. Ask yourself, was I invited to share this, or am I just telling them? If it's the latter, you're probably coming across as a messenger.
Yeah.
For sure.
And here's a video example from one of those conversations.
Okay. It's like kind of like between. All right, so let's go with that. Let's say that the United States is the only country that has borders.
Yeah.
Which was utterly remarkable to me. The United States is the only country that has borders, but what would be the point of bringing in evidence for other borders? Then the whole conversation would just devolve into, yes, it is, no, it isn't. I'm delivering a message, he's delivering a message, and that makes it a message delivery service. So what you can do is you can just accept the claim and see if a claim that's clearly factually incorrect follows or a conclusion that's based upon a factually incorrect premise follows. It's a weird way to think about how to have a conversation with someone, but it really is an excellent way to proceed so that you don't make it a message delivery service and people end up getting frustrated.
Delivering a message feels like
Yeah, that actually makes me think about the example that we were talking about earlier. I think before you joined, Reed, where I was commending Dusty because on one of the Facebook posts, there was a guy who was saying that Tim Pool's videos are trash. And instead of disagreeing with him, Dusty said, "Well, so what are some examples of this?" And the guy couldn't come up with any examples. So even though we were talking about how both of us actually could point to those examples if we wanted to, but we wanted to see if there was like any substance behind that.
Yeah, have you gotten to the unread library effect yet?
Not yet.
Have you discussed? Okay, so
No.
yeah, that's where it would apply.
Yeah.
Can you briefly say what the unread library is, Reed?
I've got a whole slide about it.
Now, Reed, remember, don't deliver a message. This is a conversation.
What is that? I think that's in the next whole chapter. Let me do it. Yeah, I got a whole thing. We can skip to it. We don't have to go.
Is that the thing where you? Oh, okay.
It's like exposure therapy, like letting them. Well, what it was is you basically asking questions about their knowledge base, and then they find out that they really don't know that much about what they're professing, basically.
This gets to their epistemology.
Mm-hmm.
Modeling. Okay, yeah, that's where it is. It's under modeling of next chapter. Is it? Where am I lost? Hang on. Here it is. Oh no, it's not. It's this.
Wait, you just had it on that slide.
There it is. Cool.
Oh yeah, there you go.
a philosopher and a psychologist, Robert A. Wilson and Frank Kyle, have researched the phenomenon of ignorance of one's ignorance. In a 1998 paper titled The Shadows and Shallows of Explanation, they studied the well-known phenomenon of people who believe they understand how things work better than they actually do. They discovered our tendency to believe we're more knowledgeable than we are because we believe in other people's expertise. Think about this like borrowing books from the great library of human knowledge and then never reading the books. We think we possess the information in the books because we have access to them. But we don't have the knowledge because we've never read the books, much less studied them in depth. Following this analogy, we'll call this fallacy the unread library effect.
There you go.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, so I was going to say right off the bat is the blessing and the curse of the internet, particularly with blogs and with YouTube and things like that. So if you are watching, if you're binging on somebody like Tim Pool, we'll go ahead and pick on him, and you think you know everything that's going on, you're grossly you could possibly be grossly misinformed, but more likely is that you're grossly underinformed.
Mm-hmm.
Because where is he getting his information? I mean, there's a whole slew of questions you could ask about this. Where is he getting his information? What are his sources? What's the credibility of those sources? Is he actually reading any peer-reviewed literature? Is he reading any books? You know, I was also touching on this with Dusty too, Andrew, is that because he was asking me, you know, what your background is, and I said, I've been studying this for the better part of 25 years. I have masters in the subject, and so I'm a trained academic. I know where to go to read the books. I know what books there are. Have I read all of those books? No. Do I sometimes might fall into the trap that I know more than I think I do? Sure, everybody does. But again, I've read the books, and I can go and read the books, and I know how to read the books. I don't rely just on the internet to really get into a subject like philosophy. Now, something else, yeah, I could go to it because I neither have the time or maybe even the interest to really get into that. And then the point about what Pete is saying in his book is that this really becomes a problem where people just watch videos or they read blogs and listen to the news or whatever it is, and they think they're a lot more informed than they are. It would be one thing if they were to say, well, based on what I've read and based on my own opinions, I think that, fill in the blank, this is it. Maybe showing you're highlighting your ignorance, you may be injecting a little bit of humility into that, where you're definitely coming across as a better person to discuss things with, instead of really believing 100% of what you read, and then you become the messenger to the other person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I should try to phrase things that way more often, I think, because I often notice myself doing that, but like partially because there's very little that the average person actually knows, who has actually investigated themselves. Like one example is climate change. Like, I haven't actually done really thorough research on climate change other than to debunk someone's argument against it or something, but I haven't seen all the scientific studies or something like that. I just sometimes I assume that I know more than I do, but I've talked to people with a variety of different perspectives and one or two experts, so I think I have more knowledge than I actually do. But right. I think in particular, just other than noticing that, like I said, just phrasing things that way, like, according to what I have learned, this is what I think, rather than just stating it as a proclamation.
Right.
I have a great example of that about global warming. Exactly. It's like a 90-second video. It's exactly what you're talking about. Want to watch it?
Sure.
Here we go.
It's happening in front of your eyes?
Yeah. Like everything, global warming, the world, the weather, stuff like that.
What's like the best example?
Just like all the earthquakes, for example, that are happening, the flooding, the climate change, it's just all of that.
And what is causing the climate to change?
Humans, people, the world.
Humans?
Mm-hmm.
What are they doing?
Not taking care of it, polluting, just stuff like that.
Polluting, mm-hmm. How so?
With all the factories, gas, meat, animals, stuff like that, pigs, cows, eating them,
They are polluting the environment by how? What are they doing
Sorry.
What are they doing specifically?
Let's say, for example, driving down the street when you can walk with the cars, and all the factories dumping all the stuff in the ocean, the boats dumping all the trash, not recycling.
Yeah. How is this stuff connected to climate change?
It just all plays a part, I believe. It's just affecting the world. It's just making it. It's a hard question to answer, truthfully, when I think about it. But I know it's true.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think maybe from the documentaries that I've watched and showed me. Now you're making me not feel so confident.
Is every documentary
100% real?
Yeah. Are they real?
To the best of my knowledge.
Every documentary?
To the best of my the ones I've watched. Not every documentary. I mean, that some are false, I guess.
And how did you determine this was actually real?
What do you mean?
If some documentaries could be not true, how did you determine that global warming ones were true?
Because it's just a real life issue. I feel I feel like I just actually see it, even though if I'm watching it on a documentary, I'm actually seeing things on the news, the Weather Network, and hearing things that are happening around the world.
Is it possible for someone to be mistaken about a feeling about something?
Yeah.
Okay. And how did you determine this was true?
It's a good question. That's a good question.
So yeah, there you go.
Reed, that was painful.
I know.
She sounds she sounds the exact kind of woman that would buy vegan cat food.
Yeah, I like how you you highlighted keywords and phrases there too. Like I believe, I feel, but I know it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't hear specific. Like I heard a little bit of like she saw things. Like I understand what she means by that. Like she has evidence for it. Like, but it's like I want her to articulate that. Like there's scientific evidence for this because of this and this and this. We know this because of this and this. Not just I feel, I believe documentaries. And we want to explore the books themselves.
Right.
Dusty, your thoughts?
How
was that painful?
Well, I'm trying to think about what Reed is actually thinking during this interview. Like, is he laughing in his head? Like, what's going on inside the head of Reed while this is occurring?
What do you feel right now, Dusty?
I feel like I wouldn't have been able to get through that conversation the way Reed did. That's how I feel.
Yeah. Reed is a black belt Zen master in conversations.
Would you have been tempted to send a message to her about what she needs to say?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't. I don't know, man. I would just, because it's like, to me, she's basically like the Candace Owens of, because she is as informed as Candace Owens is, and they have the opposite positions. It's just funny seeing that.
Yeah.
That's why even for things that are actually true and well evidenced, it's good to get people to reflect on why they believe it, so they can go and find good reasons to really believe it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, we jest about this, but you know, the sad thing is that kind of person is fairly common.
I'm not far off.
You're not that far off?
No. I've watched documentaries, and I've talked with people who are like, I've talked with at least one climate change scientist, and I've formed a different, a much less extreme opinion from hers, but and maybe I've investigated a little bit more, but I still don't have, like, I wouldn't say I could make a very authoritative argument.
Yeah, she said she was 100% confident it was true, and later on in the conversation I revealed I'm not 100% absolutely sure, but you know, I'm highly confident, like 85, 90%, but like you want to proportion your confidence to the evidence that you have.
Yeah. I would say my certainty level is similar to yours.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing about 100% confidence, this is something that I've noticed over the past several years, is that there are certain phrases that are very common anymore. 100% right. I feel. Of course, that's nothing new. You know, I feel, or I. What are some other ones I think? Passionate about. You know, the thing makes me barf whenever I hear that. But it's these kind of these phrases that enter in conversation where they're almost like filler words, and they're almost like they're talking around the issue or dancing around the issue or really trying to grope for something, like this chick was doing, just really groping. Oh yeah, it's 100%, and you know, based on the documentaries that I watched, and I'm very confident about that. And it's just like, really? And then it's, would she even be the type of person who's motivated to go read something, a scientific paper maybe even, to find out what an expert had to say, and then compare it to another expert? But it's just, I don't know, it's scary in a way. It really is.
And she used climate as an example of how the climate is changing there too.
Yeah. Well, give us evidence. Or the earthquakes.
That's the first thing. I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, there's evidence of the earthquakes. Yeah, sure, okay.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to go down that little questioning chain when she mentioned earthquakes. I'm like, what?
Yes. Yes.
I just have to. You've had to have mentally face palmed in some of these conversations, right?
Well, in Reed, I got to give Reed point. He's got the best poker face that I have ever seen.
Yeah.
Somebody that is on the internet, and I'm sure when she was talking with you, in the back of his mind, he's like, "What's she been smoking?" But it just doesn't come out, Reed. You got this perfect poker face.
Yeah.
I have thoughts in my head going that I'm not exactly showing on my face, but at this point, nothing surprises me after the nearly 1,000 conversations I've had with people.
That's right.
But when you first started, there had to be a time where you just busted out laughing. Or have you never...
Yeah, has that ever happened?
No, I don't know. Something must be wrong with me. I'm just like a robot. I might just be because I was just super nervous at the beginning and I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but I just never busted out laughing. I guess it's just my personality.
No, you're just, after you've had all these conversations, you're probably just unfazed when you meet somebody like that anymore.
Yeah, it's hard to faze me.
Yeah. Okay. So continuing with Shoot the Messenger, you got, do you have the list of the 5 options on your slide deck there? Did you want to continue with that?
No, I don't. You can do it.
Okay. So continuing it with the about the don't shoot the messenger, try to have a conversation instead of delivering a message. So the suggestions that Boghossian and Lindsey give us are: number 1, distinguish between delivering a message and authentic conversation. Delivering a message feels like teaching. There's a give and take. I think we already covered that one.
Yeah, we might have that one.
Yeah. Number 2, approach every conversation with an awareness that your partner understands problems in a way that you don't currently comprehend.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's hard to do and also very important.
Yes. So then number 3, don't meet their message delivery with your message delivery. That's not a conversation, but an invitation to debate. It's a message delivery service and a recipe for frustration and deepening someone's commitment to their beliefs.
Yeah, that's basically the ending of every Isaac Asimov book.
Yeah.
I know that's a super obscure reference, but basically in the end of every Asimov book, it's just 2 highly intellectual people checkmating themselves to death until somebody actually wins.
Yeah.
I hear you, Dusty. Okay, number 4. When you realize your partner is being a messenger, do not shoot the messenger. If you shoot the messenger in your partner, you will destroy rapport and may derail the conversation. If your partner enters messenger mode, begin a listening and learning mode, centering on asking questions. Reed, do you have any specific examples of that?
Yeah, I think that one with the creationist on my channel recently, I just went into learning mode and understanding what he thought, what his beliefs were. Because any questions I gave, he was just sending me messages, right after the other. So I just went into learning mode.
Okay. I didn't see that one. Did he seem fairly coherent in explaining, or was he all over the place?
Yeah, he had all the talking points from, I think, Kent Hovind. It was all the talking points.
Okay. All right, and then number 5. Deliver your message only upon your partner's explicit request. Be succinct, then return to a collaborative mindset that's centered upon listening and learning. Thank them for listening and ask if they have a reply. Say, thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that. I appreciate it. Any thoughts you'd like to add?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, next section, intentions.
It's a conversation with Socrates.
With Socrates, that's
Socrates.
right. So as they say in the book here, in a disagreement, people frequently assume their partner's intentions and motivations are worse than they are.
That's for sure.
Who wants to play Socrates? Who wants to play Meno? If we're looking at it all together.
Well, I am thankful, and I do appreciate that everyone here is adopting the pronunciation Socrates.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes. But remember that his famous student was Plato.
Plato, yes. Every philosophy after Plato is just a footnote to him, right? Oh, sorry, Plato.
Yes, as Whitehouse said, everything is but a footnote to Plato.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So in disagreement, you're thinking that the conversation partner's intentions are maybe malicious. They're trying to do a gotcha on you, where you should not. It's advisable to not do that. I will shy away from shoulds.
Yeah.
So they continue. If you must make an assumption about your partner's intentions, make only one. Their intentions are better than you think.
Yeah, that's another thing that's very difficult but also important to do.
Okay. Andrew, you got any examples you care to share?
Well, like, again, like, to go back to social media, it seems like that's an environment where that happens all the time, except for when it's with people you already know. And if, like, if I'm talking with someone who I already know, I assume they're arguing in good faith. But then if it's someone I don't know as well, I sort of assume they're arguing in bad faith. So it's really hard to just remind myself to try to look at them as or at least treat their argument the same way that I would with someone who I know personally and would give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay. Dusty, you mentioned earlier that you like to troll. Maybe you could add some new insight into this?
Yeah.
So, first of all, why do you troll? That's the first question.
Because it's entertaining. It has nothing really to do with just like making people laugh, making people feel some type of emotion is entertaining to me. So I don't know. I don't know how to explain how trolling makes me feel. It makes me feel something. But I don't know, man. It's like,
does it make you feel a sense of joy at having owned someone or something like that?
No, the trolling isn't about owning people. It's about supplying information and someone acting on that information. Like, for instance, like there's this one troll I did when I was a kid, and basically it was a lie. It was a troll that was a lie. So we were a group of friends, and I told the lie, and it was a blatant lie that I told. And I said that, did you know that when Einstein got really lost in thought with his theories, because he used so much of his brain power, he basically would lose control of his limbs, and he would just basically have seizures and things like that. Like, that's the type of trolls I'm talking about. I usually don't use those types of trolls in online arguments or discussions, but the type of trolling I'm mostly referring to is supplying bad information and watching that bad information being supplied to somebody else. That's something that 4chan does quite a bit. They give people bad information, and people take that bad information as truth, and it just kind of spreads out there.
Yeah, like 4chan memes that people do as trolls that then people take spread everywhere, assuming that they're totally serious.
Yeah. So mostly things like that. I don't really try to troll to hurt people's feelings or be malicious about it. It's mostly fooling people, not really I don't try to hurt people, but I do. I think it's funny when people because I've been trolled myself, and I don't get mad. I go like, oh, you got me there, ha ha ha. I see what you did. Right. So I guess because that's the kind of reaction I get from it, and then I do it to people. I'm like, I got you. I went up to you there. But I try to not do it like in a really malicious way.
So is it safe to say what really motivates you to troll is if somebody is really spouting some nonsense and you just want to take them down a notch or two?
Yeah, so trolling is basically a form of ridicule. So it's a form of ridicule without being very direct about it.
Yeah.
Well, at least in the way I do it. Because there are certain people that will be very direct about the ridicule. It's usually, I know, pointing out hypocrisy, there's various ways of doing it, and that's just kind of the way I do it, is just by trolling people. I know, one of the rules is don't troll, sorry. I'm not sure if I could throw that out of the window yet.
Their intentions are better than you think, Dusty.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Probably most of the time, to be fair.
Yeah. So then they continue. Here's another list. Here's how you can immediately apply this with intentions. So number 1, if your partner assumes you have bad intentions, do not waste time trying to convince her otherwise. Instead, switch the conversation from your intentions to your reasoning. Number 2, if you start to assume your partner has bad intentions, switch to a frame of curiosity. Consider that they may know something you do not know. Number 3, admit frustration. Often people you find frustrating are just trying to help. Equally often they're doing so from the messenger stance. That's why they frustrate you.
Yeah.
Number 4, do not feed the trolls.
Yeah.
Trolls are toxic to conversations. Let them waste their time. Stop playing their game. Block or mute their accounts. You're under no obligation to engage someone whose goal is to irritate you. Never be bullied into having a conversation. Have a conversation because you want to, not because you are being harassed for not speaking to someone. Consent applies to all participants.
Well, there's also. Go ahead, Andrew.
I was just gonna say, don't allow yourself to be raped by conversations.
Well, I was gonna say, what do you mean by don't allow yourself to be raped by conversations?
To go into conversations that people demand that you get into.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, you're under no obligation.
That's a good way to put it.
Just say no.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, that was funny. I was gonna say, Jesus, it was so funny, I forgot what I was gonna say. I think it had something to do with trolling, but, damn you, Andrew.
Yeah.
See, that is one of the reasons why sometimes following these rules are hard.
Mm-hmm. I did exactly what you criticized yourself for doing, interjecting with a joke.
Oh, I don't care about that. Interjecting with the joke is fine with me. I encourage that.
Okay.
Hey, I might not hit, but hey, you tried.
Yeah.
Points for effort.
Man.
All right. And then number 7, walk away. So know when to walk away even when the conversation is going well. There may come a point when you've exhausted your options. Perhaps you have nothing left to say, you feel like you've been going around and around, or you're at an impasse. A common mistake is to attempt to fix or reset conversations and then continue. Don't. Instead, part amicably. People need time to wrestle with doubt, incorporate new information. mull over challenges and different perspectives, and rethink their positions. And so do you. Changing one's mind happens slowly and in a way that suits one's individual psychology and habits. How to end a conversation. Another list. So number 1, end the conversation if your primary emotion is frustration. Okay, Reed, has that ever happened in one of your conversations?
Where I've been frustrated.
Or if the other party's been frustrated?
Yeah, I did like at the last Sick La Via, where they closed down a street and had people bring out their bicycles and ride bicycles. I did a live stream, like right outside the Pantages Theater. Someone talked about immigration and whether or not Antifa should be designated a terrorist organization, and that did not go very well. They got pretty frustrated pretty quickly, and I don't think they left on a positive note. They got pretty frustrated.
I saw that one. Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
So who decided to end the conversation? You or they? Or both?
Well, after it went on for like longer than I would prefer it to, but I just let him vent and listen to him, and but he ended it eventually.
Okay. Dusty, you ever had one of those conversations?
A conversation that should have ended?
Yeah, that...
Oh, I've ended conversations, yeah.
Okay,
definitely.
Can you give us an example?
Well, I'm not going to be very specific because it's one of those conversations that shouldn't be public. But let's just say there are times when, in your personal relationships, when you know arguing back and forth is not doing anything. And I have ended a conversation basically saying, you know, we're not getting anywhere with this arguing. Let's let it cool off for a while. But if we're talking about just regular people, in my job, I've hung up on a couple people before.
Oh, have you?
Yes.
I gotta hear one of these.
Well, one of them wasn't even the customer on the line. It was whoever their husband was in the background. And the person in the background was just talking mad shit. And I could hear it.
Vegan cat food, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't different. It was a different issue, but I told the lady, it's like, yeah, you know, we have to make sure to keep this conversation civil. I'm just letting you know, because if it continues the way it's continuing, I may need to end the call. And she's like, well, I'm not saying anything. I was like, well, I could certainly hear things being said about me in the background, and that's very distracting. So she relayed that information to him, and he kept continuing, and was like, no, I kind of got to end this conversation here. Sorry. Call us back if you need help. But yeah, that's like one example. Other examples just when someone is being overtly rude. We're allowed to warn them, said, hey, you know, this is, we cannot continue the conversation like this. And if you want to continue to see if we can address the issue, we will have to refrain from personal attacks, etc. But if it continues, you know, it's just, hey, you know, this is not getting anywhere. If you need help, give us a call back. But yeah, sometimes I'll just like I'll forgo policy. Someone just gets super racist. I don't even say, hey, you're not supposed to say that. I just hang the phone up.
Right.
So, yeah, it's like, man, I don't have to sit here and go through this crap, especially if someone's being racist.
Yeah.
So it's like, I know I'm supposed to report this. Because actually, if someone comes on the phone and gets racist, there will be a flag on their account. So it's not I should have reported it, but I was like, you know what? I didn't follow protocol, so I'm not going to report it. But yeah, just if people are overtly uncivil, that's a good time to end the conversation.
For sure.
So you can troll them later.
Well, look, I'm not going to say I have not done that.
Oh,
I'm going to say that. Here's what I'll say: it is never a good idea to be an a-hole to somebody who has access to your personal information. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, yes. That's an important public service and message to anybody who's listening.
That is the extent of what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say anything beyond that.
Okay. Okay.
I have a few examples of that too. The most of them that I'm thinking of off the top of my head are with my friend who I've told you about, Dusty, who's like really ridiculously, extremely right wing and believes like every
that guy.
Yeah, every single stereotype of a right wing person that you could possibly imagine. So one of the examples of me just saying I'm not talking about this anymore is climate change, because I would spend hours like looking up data about climate change and stuff, and regardless of what I said, he would just go back to his original position. And then the same with like every other stereotypical position, like unions are awful, the Canadian healthcare system is awful, and the American system is better, and basically standard political
system, man.
Well, here's what I'll say. You shouldn't have spent that much time researching for a guy who thinks that Americans started using debit cards 4 years ago. It's a waste of time, Andrew.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But Andrew, it's the earthquakes. That's proof positive of climate change.
I wasn't one of my arguments, actually.
All right, back to the list. Breathe. Literally breathe. When you initially feel yourself becoming frustrated, back off, slow down, don't feel pressured to fill pauses with speech, and breathe. Okay. Always good advice.
Yeah.
Number 3. If someone wants to end the conversation, politely thank them for speaking with you. Is that what you do with that Antifa guy, Reed?
Yeah. I would always say thanks for the conversation at the end, for sure. And at Politicon, there was one person that sat down. I asked him if he had any particular political claims that he wanted to talk about, but he didn't think of any, so just end the conversation there.
Oh yeah, I saw that one. That was like a 30-second conversation.
I have to check that out. How can you go to Politicon and not engage in that way?
Yeah. Strange.
Yeah. All right, number 4. If you think you have caused your partner to doubt one of her beliefs, that is a good time to stop the conversation. Allow her to explore her doubt and to wonder about it on her own terms. If she continues to express curiosity, state that this is a good opportunity for both of you to think about these issues. You can then part ways or change the subject, depending upon the context. So Reed, what percentage of your conversations have ended that way?
And in like a very clear expression of curiosity or doubt.
Yeah.
I'd say maybe a third, maybe.
Okay.
20% to 30%. Yeah.
And how long are the pauses?
Only like a few seconds.
No. Not a few minutes.
No.
Okay. Dusty, have you ever had any of those kind of conversations where you clearly see that the other person, you've really engendered doubts in their mind, and then you end the conversation?
Engendered doubts. It's hard to say. Because I always feel like whenever I try to have political conversations or any conversations in that manner here with my coworkers, whenever I pull up stuff, maybe I just need to be more of a listener and be more observant of their point of view. But as far as making someone say, I think I made someone say, about Elizabeth Warren recently.
Oh.
And then ended a conversation.
Okay.
And it was about basically that the person didn't know that Elizabeth Warren had a way to raise corporate money. And it was like the big thing about her is like, oh, I'm going to be like Bernie. I'm not going to take big money. And then I said, well, she will be receiving funds from the DNC, and they raise their money through big money. And they're like, oh, okay. Let me think about that now.
I think, Reed, I think you need to go. I think you need to get that song for your, or maybe P could do it too for your questioning sessions. The things you make you go song.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's good.
That's the theme song. It's an underrated song, and it has been, 20-odd years later. Gosh, 25 odd years later. Jeez.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, need to resurrect it. All right. So then, yes, if you cause it a doubt, it's time to stop the conversation. And then number 5, thank your partner when you end the conversation. Okay, and I think that's enough. I didn't really want to go into Chapter 3, just going over what they had to say about hallmarks of good conversation, their definition.
Cool. Yeah, 3 is a big chapter.
Yeah.
Well, we could pick that up. As I was planning on doing this in segments, so
okay.
If we can pick up on that the next time we convene.
Sure. Works for me.
Yeah, because this is definitely a deep dive, a very deep dive into this book here.
That's right. We wouldn't have known about the vegan cat food had we not done this part.
True. Actually,
Andrew knew about it. Andrew already knew about the vegan cat food.
Yeah.
I made that post on multiple forums, so I was like, hey, listen to this vegan cat story. And then I get one person objecting, how dare you? I had my cat, and my vet said I can give my cat vegan cat food. And I was like, well, this lady didn't do it on advice from a vet. She thought it was cool because people on the internet were doing it.
Yes. And then my question to the other person is, why do you feel the need to give your cat vegan cat food?
I didn't ask that question, but I wonder what kind of answer I would have gotten.
That would be a very good question and a very interesting answer, I'm sure.
Yes. Okay, so how do you want to end this?
Well, we usually wrap it up with plugs. So, you guys can go ahead and plug it away.
Okay.
We'll plug in. Okay, who wants to plug first?
Doesn't matter to me.
How about you go, Andrew? Because I'm associated with you.
True. Okay. Yeah. So if people want to, they can check out my YouTube channel, Mindgasms, where what happens more often than anything else lately is that Tim and I do deep dives into philosophy, and with others too in our postmodern theology series that we're doing with Shane Kennedy, of course. And I also do conversations about all sorts of other topics, and started doing some movie chats with Dusty and also with Chris James from Mixed Mental Arts. I do my short videos about ideas too, like I do just quick unstructured videos, and then I'm also working on a series of videos on Michel Foucault's History of Sexuality book, And and I also read chapters of my novel on there that I'm writing sometimes too. And if people want to, they also can check out my blog, which is at mindgasms.theblogpress.com, where I write blogs about ideas, and I publish chapters of my novel on there as well, and short stories and poems sometimes. And then I'm on the social medias, my Facebook, Ibuha, and the Twitter at Andrew Meintzer. My last name is spelled Meintzer, weird German spelling. And then, also if people want to, they can give me money on Patreon, which is also Mindgasms. And and obviously to plug Tim there too, like I said, we do awesome conversations about philosophy, and Tim teaches me and anyone else who wants to watch about very interesting thinkers and ideas within philosophy.
Yeah, I highly recommend you check out Tim and Andrew's videos. They're really informative about philosophy. And Tim, did you have any specific plugs for yourself?
I'm just a guest on Andrew's podcast. At the top of the conversation, just to repeat, I'm quite well read in the field. I'm not an expert, though. I do know my limitations. But I know enough about the literature to do the deep dive in there. And the thing I always like to say about philosophy when you really get into it is that it requires time, it requires effort, brain power, and it requires a lot of reading on the backstory. Don't take anything for granted.
And we should mention, too, that you've also been on Hayden Bruce's podcast, Pragmatic Christian, and James Sullivan's podcast, James and the Giant podcast, where you did 3 episodes on that one, deep dives into postmodernism. And with Hayden, I believe you did episodes on, was it William James? Yeah. Pragmatism, and then the 3 of us are doing a series on Richard Rorty.
Yep.
All right, great. And Reed, what do you got for us?
Yeah, cool. So, my name is Reed Nicewonder. I have a YouTube channel called Cordial Curiosity. That's where I go out and record conversations with random people in public, and I ask them questions about why they believe whatever, and upload them to my channel. So feel free to check it out there. Just Google Cordial Curiosity, YouTube, and I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And also I've been editing and releasing videos for Peter Boghossian based on this book on the channel New Discourses on YouTube. So check that out as well.
Awesome. And I'll link your guys' channels here when I publish the video as well. So if you guys have any other special links like Patreon or something, let me know.
Cool.
All right. And this is the Mixed Mellow Arts channel. If you want to really help out, please spread the word. I'm pretty sure this book can help out so many different people. It's not just people, random fools on the internet. Like I said, I'm actually reading this book mainly because of my job. This has not much to do with arguing with people over the internet, but there are a lot of good tips here for anyone who's a working professional who deals with clients. But as far as Mixed Mellow Arts, you can find us on the various platforms. Of course, like and subscribe the video. Make sure you click on the little bell icon so that you get the notifications when we have new videos coming out. And Reed, he edits the videos, so I'm going to give him a shout out there. And also we got Patreon. Every little bit helps us out. Yes, Brian Callen's like a millionaire, but he still needs a new Tesla. So make sure you donate some money.
Yeah,
all right.
Stay tuned for Mark Manson video podcast, December 15th. That's when that'll be up.
Great. So December 15th, new video podcast coming. everyone stay tuned, and if you want to know about it, make sure you click the little bell icon by the subscribe button, and it will tell you whenever we release new content. But thank you, everybody. When did you guys want to reconvene? What is the most convenient for you guys and going forward for the next discussion on this book?
So, would we agree that a weekend is probably better? Saturday night like tonight?
Yeah, this is definitely my preferred day of doing things.
Okay, so possibly the 16th, the 23rd, not the 30th because I'll be out of town because of Thanksgiving, and possibly December the 7th and the 14th.
Is the 16th next week?
Is it? Yes, it is next week.
Okay, what about you, Reed? Is the 16th out of the realm of possibility for you?
That works for me. Ditto. Just that not Thanksgiving weekend, but the rest I'm free.
No, Thanksgiving weekend there will be no live stream. So, because I'm not even going to work Thanksgiving weekend. I'm going to have the rare opportunity to go on vacation. But great. So is that good for you, Andrew? Next week?
Yeah, for sure. I'm always up for it every Saturday.
Awesome. So I'll go post the event in Facebook when I get home, and we will reconvene next week to discuss more of the book and go over some of these awesome points here. Well, I'm actually really thankful for you guys for coming today. I know we started a little bit late and things got a little bit frazzled because we didn't know what time we were starting, but that's all good. I really appreciate you guys talking with me about this today.
Sure thing. Thanks, Dusty.
Same here. Thanks.
Thanks for the conversation.
All right. Well, everybody, good night. I'm going to press the stop streaming button. Of course, like always, there is a time lag. So if you hear